He said, "Choose fast, runaway bride, and her old life ended." Audrey begged Silvio Gallo for a door, an escape, anything that would keep her from walking back to the man who humiliated her. But Silvio didn't offer rescue. He offered a deal. Go back to Max, or leave the church under his name. With her cheating fiancé pounding on the locked doors and a coffin at the altar, Audrey made the most dangerous choice of her life. She said yes to the Mafia boss.
Tonight, you and I are going to step into the freezing rain and walk right alongside her. Picture 25-year-old Audrey sprinting down the soaked pavement, the heavy silk of her wedding dress dragging through the dark puddles. She rips the veil from her hair like she is tearing off a chain. Behind her, her toxic fiancé Max is screaming his lungs out in the street. Driven by pure adrenaline, she spots the heavy oak doors of an old stone sanctuary and throws herself inside. Sometimes, the absolute bravest thing a broken spirit can do is simply run away before a bad promise destroys your life. She thinks she is just finding a quiet place to hide. But out of the storm, she is crashing headfirst into the most dangerous, ruthless crime syndicate in all of Providence. Audrey stumbles into the dim, heavy air, dripping cold mud onto the marble floor, and her blood completely freezes. She has just crashed a Mafia funeral. Rows of hardened, silent men in dark suits slowly turn their heads toward the trembling bride. Two massive enforcers step past her, pulling the heavy doors shut until the deadbolts click. Outside, Max begins violently pounding on the wood. Just hours ago, she caught that coward kissing another woman, reducing her to a convenient, manageable backup plan. It is a harsh truth we all learn. Eventually, never let someone else dictate your worth, especially a man who keeps you waiting in the wings. Max is now out in the rain howling over his ruined social image, while Audrey is locked in a sanctuary breathing the same air as killers. She turns her panicked gaze back toward the altar, and there he is. Silvio Gallo moves down the center aisle with the terrifying grace of a man who owns the shadows. His face is sharp, carved from marble and violence, with pale blue eyes that strip away every secret you try to hide. He stops so close she has to tilt her head back just to meet his stare. He slowly takes in her ruined gown and bruised bare feet, and a dark, arrogant smirk touches his lips. He calls her a runaway bride, his voice a low, commanding baritone that echoes in the quiet church. Sometimes the universe places a terrifying obstacle in your path just to forcefully redirect you toward your true destiny. Audrey can barely breathe under his heavy gaze, but she refuses to look away. She looks this underworld king directly in the eye, her voice trembling as she begs for a quiet back door. But Silvio merely studies her face. He murmurs that he needed a sudden solution, and she just walked into his life dressed perfectly for the part. As confusion grips her, he tilts his head toward the rattling doors and asks who is hunting her. The very second she whispers the name Max Gordon, the temperature in the cathedral turns to ice. Silvio repeats the name, the syllables dripping with ancient, venomous hatred. It is a cold reminder that the people we think we know often conceal the darkest, ugliest histories. Silvio extends a scarred hand toward her, ordering her to walk with him, just as Max screams one final, desperate threat against the thick wood. Now, stick with me here, because the tension in this room is suffocating. Our desperate bride stares at his outstretched hand, believing he is just offering a quiet exit from this nightmare. Then, the door handle violently shakes her again. It is the terrifying, aggressive sound of a man who wants to own her. You and I have probably both lingered in toxic situations for far too long, but here is the raw truth leaping blindly into the dark is often than resting in the arms of a familiar demon. With zero backup plan, she places her trembling fingers in his. They walk together down the long aisle, passing armed sentinels and a closed casket heavy with the scent of lilies. Suddenly, a man with the exact same harsh jawline stands up. Aldo glares, demanding answers from his brother. Silvio turns his head toward his brother with this agonizing, unhurried patience, as if Aldo is nothing but a fleeting shadow. Without raising his voice, he casually announces that he is getting married today. The sheer audacity echoes off the vaulted ceilings. Audrey completely paralyzes. She feels the dangerous heat of his palm and realizes this ruthless stranger just rewrote her entire existence without a single question. Listen closely. You can never hand over the pen to your own life story, no matter how intimidating the person holding the ink might be. She forcefully yanks her hand away from his grip, reminding him fiercely that he promised her an exit. Silvio just locks those cold blue eyes onto hers and calmly whispers that he is giving her exactly what she asked for. The absolute madness of the situation finally breaks her. She snaps. She's that he just declared them engaged and does not even know her real name. Silvio merely tilts his head, that arrogant smirk returning, and breathes out, "Audrey, I presume." She fires right back, her chest heaving, telling him she refuses to trade one cage for another. It is a painful reality we all must face. Escaping prison means nothing if you just walk into a different cell. Silvio leans into her space, offering her a brutal choice. She can turn around and face the toxic coward outside, or she can leave this altar under his absolute protection. The heavy wooden doors shudder as Max violently kicks them, crying about his precious investors and his wounded ego. Silvio watches the door, deeply entertained. A wave of pure desperation crashes over her as she begs him to just unlock a side door. She warns him that if he truly knows Max Gordon, he knows her ex will never let this insult go unpunished. Silvio looks right through her panic, his voice a smooth, terrifying hum, as he agrees that Max will not walk away. Finding herself completely cornered, she demands he let her deal with the fallout alone. He simply offers his hand again. Real courage is never about an absence of fear. It is about making a terrifying choice when all your safe harbors have burned down. Her heart hammers violently against her ribs as she takes his hand. Then the devastating truth finally drops. He is Silvio Gallo. In Providence, the Gallo name is a whispered curse, a dynasty built on blood and tragedy. The cold, damp stone seeps through her bare feet as the horrifying reality washes over her mind. She has not just crashed a random funeral, she is standing over the casket of the reigning Mafia king. His son, the newly crowned Don, watches her with absolute, unnerving stillness. He softly explains that he desperately needs a wife, and her pathetic ex requires a brutal lesson in respect. It is a perfect, violent collision of needs. Max's entitled, demanding voice bleeds through the ancient walls. Audrey tries to pull away, paralyzed by the weight of the Gallo legacy. But Silvio flashes a wild, dark smile, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with an iron certainty. Just remember this, sometimes the absolute craziest risks become the exact escape hatch you need to survive. Let us pause and really look at this agonizing moment together. The sanctuary is thick with the smell of burning wax and sorrow. Audrey stands trembling, her ruined wedding gown draped over the marble like a heavy ghost. Two massive enforcers step forward in the gloom to serve as witnesses, while an aging priest opens his leather-bound book. Knowing far better than to ask questions, Silvio leans in, the heat of his breath brushing her ear, urging her to just say the word. She stares at the altar, fully aware she has traded a rainstorm for a devastating hurricane. She sets her terms, demanding his protection but drawing a rigid, absolute boundary regarding her body. It proves that even in your darkest hour, you must fiercely protect your boundaries. Silvio respects her terms and simply nods. She tunes out the Latin prayers of the trembling priest, focusing entirely on the muffled shouts of the man who broke her trust. For 2 agonizing years, she shrank her own soul just to keep that selfish man comfortable, and she is finally finished. Lifting her chin, she looks the Mafia heir in the eye and says her vows with a voice of stone. Silvio immediately slips a heavy, cold gold signet ring onto her trembling finger, turning the family crest inward against her palm. It is a fake union, but the weight of that metal feels intensely, terrifyingly real. He murmurs that she is a gallo now. He leads her back down the aisle, his grip steady and warm. Never forget that the most devastating revenge is simply choosing your own power over a miserable existence. The heavy doors swing open, and Max stands there dripping in the vestibule, utterly confused. Silvio does not miss a beat, his baritone voice dripping with dark amusement as he announces he found the lost bride. You can practically see the panicked math running behind Max's eyes as he calculates his ruined reputation. He barks an order for Audrey to heal, complaining bitterly about his 300 wealthy guests. But Silvio raises a single, commanding hand, his voice dropping to a terrifying absolute calm. He introduces himself, then drops the devastating reality that Audrey is now his wife. He commands Max to watch his tone when speaking to Audrey Gallo. The silence that follows is suffocating. Bullies will always roar until they are finally forced to look real power in the face. Looking entirely defeated, Max weakly stammers, asking what she has done. Audrey squeezes the Don's hand, drawing strength from the monster standing beside her. She locks eyes with the man who betrayed her hours before their forever began, and tells him with icy clarity that she is still a bride, just not his. The humiliation drains the color straight out of Max's face. He is being publicly discarded by the woman he thought he owned. Silvio barely moves a muscle, giving a microscopic nod to his shadows. The enforcers step out of the dark, and Silvio smoothly suggests Max leave before the conversation turns fatal. Max stumbles backward into the rain, utterly broken. It is a beautiful life lesson. Never tolerate disrespect, because eventually the trash will always take itself out. The heavy oak doors shut, sealing away the ghost of her past. Silvio stands there, slowly rubbing his thumb over Audrey's trembling knuckles. He acts like dismantling 2 families was nothing more than a minor change in his afternoon schedule. He gently tells her to dry her eyes, and only then does she realize the tears are falling. A slow, mocking clap echoes through the hall. It is Aldo, his brother, wearing a look of pure contempt. He sneers, calling it a beautiful performance for their father's funeral. But Silvio does not flinch. He holds her hand tighter, staring his brother down with chilling calm, noting their father always loved a good opportunity. We all face moments that try to break our spirit. Sometimes, keeping your composure when the world expects you to crumble is the only victory you really need. Silvio does not look back as he tells her to follow him out into the daylight. The reality hits Audrey hard. The man she loved only saw her as a burden, and now she is bound to a crime boss whose name makes the streets hold their breath. You and I know how terrifying it is to lose control of your own story. She sits frozen in his limousine, the ring feeling like ice on her skin. Her bare feet hide beneath the muddy hem of her ruined wedding dress. The weight of his gaze becomes too much, and she snaps, demanding he stop staring. She asks if he has never seen a barefoot woman. Silvio just leans back, totally at ease, admitting he has never seen one quite like her. Taking a blind leap into the absolute unknown is often the only real way to discover who you really are. Audrey shifts against the leather seats, pretending not to care as the city blurs past the tinted glass. Without warning, Silvio leans in. His warmth radiates against her right before his deep voice whispers that she still looks beautiful. Her throat goes dry. She forces her eyes to stay on the window, terrified that looking at him might undo her fragile strength. The heavy car soon stops before towering iron gates that part like a dark curtain. The estate is a monument to old money and silent violence, a stone fortress brooding over a grey, endless ocean. 5 security cars glide behind them in perfect formation. Keeping your guard high is often the only true way to protect yourself when life drops you into the middle of a dangerous new world. The heavy door swings open to the salty air. Audrey steps out, but the moment her bare heel meets the unforgiving gravel, a sharp gasp escapes her lips. Before she can even react, Silvio is there. With quiet grace, he sweeps her into his arms, carrying her toward the mansion as if she weighs nothing. Her hands grab the fabric of his dark suit, her voice shaking as she asks what he is doing. He does not blink, calmly asking if she would rather bleed on the driveway. He carries her up the massive stone steps, pausing just outside the grand doorway. A faint smile touches his lips as he mutters that he is a traditional man at heart. We often learn the hard way that the people who seem the most dangerous are sometimes the only ones willing to carry us through our roughest storms. The entrance hall feels suffocating. 5 rigid staff members stand at attention as Silvio sheds his dark jacket. His voice is a low hum, yet it commands the room. He declares her the mistress of the house, demanding their respect. 5 heads dip in a chilling vow of loyalty. Audrey stands frozen, arms crossed to hold her trembling body together. She whispers that her parents are still at the venue, exposed to her ex. Silvio loosens his tie, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He states that the man knows exactly what it would cost to touch anything belonging to him. That possessive tone sends a warning shiver down her spine. He hands her his phone, promising her family will soon meet their new son-in-law. A single choice, made in panic, will often bind us to a destiny far heavier than we ever expected. Silvio asks about her job with casual indifference. When Audrey admits she works for her ex, a dangerous smirk touches his lips. He declares her resignation is already accepted. Before she can process this loss of control, the heavy doors swing open. Aldo strolls in, laughing a dark, twisted laugh at her ruined dress. He mocks Silvio for stealing the spotlight at the funeral of the man who raised them in violence. Aldo studies Audrey, his pale blue eyes mirroring his brother, yet holding a chilling, distinct kind of venom. She holds her ground, finally seeing the twisted bloodline she just married into. It is a harsh truth that desperately running away from one painful fire will often drop you directly into the burning heart of another. The air in that room is heavy enough to choke on when Aldo steps in. He leans down, scanning Audrey like a trinket he dug out of the dirt. "Clean her up a little," he mutters, reaching for her hair. She jerks back, terrified. In a flash, Silvio is there. "Hands, Aldo," he says. His voice is a low rumble, the exact kind of quiet that promises destruction. She is a gallo now. Aldo just flashes a cold smirk, throwing his hands up in a fake surrender. He drops one last mocking insult about Silvio's taste before turning toward the door. It is a harsh truth to swallow, realizing that some people will constantly test your boundaries just to see where they snap. In a world full of predators, planting your feet firmly is your only real shield. "He is a bit rough in bed," Aldo whispers, his words sliding into her ear like a snake. He pulls back with a dead-eyed smile. We are still burying our father, after all. The door thuds shut behind him, leaving a suffocating silence. Audrey stands frozen, her jaw clamped tight. Beside her, Silvio breaks the quiet. That is how Aldo says hello. Give it a week. She stares at him, utterly lost. Is this family completely broken? Too exhausted to argue, she asks a maid for a room. Silvio orders his new wife's suite prepared, throwing her a tiny, arrogant wink before walking off. It is a painful reality, listeners. People will always make excuses for the poison in their own bloodline. When they do, your best move is to simply hold on to your pride and walk away. Everything she needs, Silvio barks. Clothes, shoes. 1 hour. Audrey lets out a shaky breath, feeling trapped inside some dark mafia tragedy. Halfway up the stairs, his sharp voice stops her. Mrs. Gallo. He hands over his phone. Call your family. Tell them you are safe. The bedroom she is given is a beautiful cage. She sits on the massive bed, staring at the screen. She is wearing a mob boss's name now. She dials, and her mother's frantic voice is pure panic, crying about the ruined wedding, the furious ex-groom, and the chaos she left behind. You and I have probably both felt that exact kind of helplessness. Sometimes life grabs you by the collar and throws you straight into the dark water. You just have to learn how to swim before the current drags you under. Mom, listen, Audrey pleads, her heart hammering. I couldn't marry Max. I got married this morning to someone else. The following silence is heavy enough to crush bone. Her mother's voice finally cracks with pure disbelief. Audrey begs her not to call the cops, promises to explain it later, and hangs up. The giant room feels suffocating. All she wants is a hot shower to wash the madness away, but this world does not offer rest. The violent crack of gunfire suddenly shatters the quiet. She rushes to the window, palms flat against the cold glass, staring out at the dark estate. It is a brutal truth we all face. Just when you think you have found a safe corner to catch your breath, life loves to break down the door and remind you the storm is already inside the house. Audrey presses her hand to the window, watching Silvio on the vast lawn below. The grey ocean broods behind him as he raises a rifle to his shoulder. A loud crack splits the air, shattering a clay disc. He does not blink, his dark focus tracking the next target. The unnerving stillness of his shoulders between shots makes her stomach turn. Every pull of the trigger echoes through the massive estate like a violent end to her old life. Just this morning, she was holding flowers in a bright church, expecting a normal future. Now, she wears a heavy Mafia ring, watching her dangerous husband fire rounds into the sky. Her past is entirely erased. The deepest lessons come from how rapidly our reality can shatter, proving we must learn to adapt or be completely swallowed by the storm. Welcome back. Tonight, you and I are unpacking a story where the past burns and the future bleeds. The heavy echo of gunfire still rings in Audrey's ears, each violent crack tearing through the predictable life she knew just hours ago. She stands frozen, pressing her bare palm against the freezing glass, the sharp chill of the marble seeping into her skin. Audrey Palmer walked into that church absolutely sure of her destiny. But now, Audrey Gallo stares out at a completely unrecognizable world, terrified of what this hardened version of herself might do. After a scalding shower washes away her shattered fairy tale, she finds a jet-black dress waiting on the bed, a garment promising quiet, undeniable power. Sometimes, the only way to discover who you truly are is to completely lose the person you thought you were supposed to be. Audrey does not look like a woman who just fled barefoot from the wreckage of a ruined wedding. She looks like a queen stepping out of the ashes. A dark, knowing smirk touches her lips. If the world wants to ruin her day, she will just throw her own twisted party. She scoops up the torn, muddy disaster of her white gown and steps out into the damp night air. Down below, Silvio lounges in the shadows, an absolute portrait of underworld control. His rifle rests casually beside a glass of amber whiskey. He watches the dark ocean, but his eyes drift as the heat of the fire pit catches Audrey's silhouette. Without a single tremble, she holds out that ruined symbol of a fake romance. She drops it into the flames. The white silk is instantly devoured. The hard truth of it all? You have to watch your old life burn to the ground before you can clearly see the path forward. The fire completely devours the white silk, and Audrey does not even blink as the ashes drift upward. You know that suffocating weight when you are trapped in a toxic cycle? You can almost see that heavy burden melting right off her shoulders. For 2 agonizing years, she shrank herself down, swallowed her own voice, and played the meek partner just because a coward named Max Gordon found her manageable. The fire consumes the final thread of that lie, as if the universe itself is hitting a massive reset button. She lets the blistering heat wash over her face, feeling alive for the very first time. From the edge of the shadows, Silvio leans in, his voice a dangerous velvet murmur. He tells her she looks like absolute poetry on fire. He has been watching this glorious rebirth. Never shrink your spirit just to fit comfortably inside someone else's fragile, tiny world. Silvio measures her carefully, taking in the sharp cut of the black dress and the utter lack of fear shining in her green eyes. He gives a slow, heavy nod. In the quiet theater of his mind, he is probably marveling at how a runaway bride just transformed into a terrifyingly beautiful force of nature. He watches over the rim of his whiskey glass as she marches directly toward him, the roaring fire casting wild shadows across her face. She stops barely 2 feet away, locking onto his gaze with absolute certainty. The silence stretches, thick and heavy with unspoken tension. But she lets it burn. Then she makes her stand. She tells him the naive girl is dead, and whatever this dark Mafia bond requires, she is fully committed. No man will ever make her feel small again. You have to stand your ground, even when staring directly into the eyes of a ruthless mob boss. Rather than acting surprised, a wicked, knowing smirk touches Silvio's lips. He raises his heavy glass to her in a silent toast, delivering a cold, hard truth. Weak women do not survive long in his violent world. But before the weight of those words can fully settle between them, a massive security guard steps out of the gloom. The guard delivers the bitter news. Max Gordon is out at the front gates, throwing a desperate tantrum, alongside 5 armed thugs. Silvio does not even break his intense gaze with Audrey. Stick with me, this is where it gets interesting. He takes a deliberate sip of his drink, completely untouched by the threat. He casually orders his men to drag Max's tart to the front garden, refusing to let that kind of trash inside. He slings the rifle over his shoulder. Real power never panics when a ghost from the past shows up barking. It simply arms up and waits. Audrey watches his broad shoulders fade into the dark, the fire still roaring wildly behind her. She takes one deep, anchoring breath, lifts her chin to the night sky, and marches directly into her very first Mafia conflict as the new Mrs. Gallo. Out in the front garden, it is pure, agonizing tension. Silvio strolls down the stone steps, with the rifle resting easily on his shoulder, utterly indifferent to the 5 heavily armed thugs circling Max. Max stands there dripping with cold sweat, desperately trying to project strength, but he is visibly shaking. Silvio pauses, looking down at the trembling man with absolute disgust, mocking him for having the sheer audacity to show his face tonight. Max stammers, throwing his hands up in a pathetic attempt to play the victim. Fake confidence will inevitably crumble to dust the second it comes face to face with genuine lethal power. Sweating bullets, Max tries to weave a desperate lie. He claims Audrey is simply suffering a breakdown from a stressful day, even having the blind nerve to warn Silvio that a feared Mafia don does not want this kind of messy, emotional baggage ruining his reputation. He actually demands they hand her over quietly. Silvio responds with a terrifying, ice-cold smile that chills the night air. He verbally obliterates Max right there on the gravel, pointing out the absolute pathetic nature of a man chasing a woman who literally sprinted away from his altar. He tells Max that Audrey is not broken. She finally woke up to see the tiny, cowardly man he truly is. Then Silvio drops the final nail in the coffin, lowering his voice to a lethal whisper as he brings up the cheating. No matter how deep you bury them, your darkest secrets will always find a way to catch up to you. You and I have seen people desperately cling to control. Any rational man would fold, but Max actually tries to negotiate. He pulls a pathetic trump card, smugly claiming he has Audrey's passport in his car. On paper, he argues, she is still his bride. Silvio just stares at him with cold, crushing pity. He lowers his heavy rifle to the stone floor and asks if Max genuinely believes the underworld operates on filing cabinets. His Mafia family built the very church stand in. For the Gallo bloodline, a wedding is sealed by blood, a priest, and a vow. Paper means absolutely nothing here. Listen closely. We often mistake a piece of paper for power, but true authority is never written down. It is a heavy gravity you feel the second a real boss walks into the room. The heavy oak doors swing wide, and Audrey steps into the night, wearing a pitch-black dress. She walks like she owns the pavement beneath her feet, shoulders back, heels striking the stone like a ticking timer. She stops right beside Silvio, so close the air crackles. Inside, her heart is hammering a frantic rhythm, but outwardly, she is carved from pure ice. Max just stares, paralyzed like deer caught on a dark road. Audrey looks dead into his eyes and calmly asks where his side piece went. Max scrambles, loudly claiming he made her, that without his ring, she is absolutely nobody. But remember this, never let a toxic soul convince you they wrote the story of your success. Your worth is built by your own hands. Silvio tenses, ready to end him, but Audrey is already holding the reins. Audrey does not even blink. Her face remains stone, but her shoulders drop a fraction, shedding 2 years of heavy lies. She looks at Max and agrees. She tells him he showed her plenty, especially the secrets on her wedding day she was never supposed to find. The truth is, sometimes the worst betrayals are exactly the painful wake-up call you need to finally open your eyes. Max clenches his jaw. Right at that second, Silvio pulls a massive power move. Without warning, his arm wraps securely around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. Audrey feels the solid, dangerous warmth of the Mafia don at her back. Standing there, facing her toxic ex, she actually feels anchored. Silvio tilts her chin up, leaving her exactly one heartbeat to realize what comes next. Stick with me here. We all recognize a staged kiss, but this goes beyond a simple act. Audrey tries to convince herself it is just a trick to break Max, but when Silvio kisses her slow, commanding, and absolutely certain, she completely melts against him. Across the courtyard, Max is having a pathetic meltdown, yelling like a jealous child. When they finally break apart, the night air is suffocating. Silvio turns to Max, his amused smirk dead. His voice drops into a flat, bone-chilling tone, laying down 2 final rules. Do not touch what is mine and never come back. Pay attention to this. True power never has to shout to dominate a room. He gives Max 10 seconds to disappear, Completely defeated, Max mutters under his breath, turns around, and slowly walks out of her life forever. Max and his crew scramble away like terrified rats, and Audrey watches the shadows swallow them. 2 years of her life evaporated, leaving her completely quiet inside. But the second they are gone, her survival instinct flares. She turns a lethal glare on Silvio, demanding to know where he even found the guy. She locks eyes with the terrifying mob boss and draws a hard line. She warns him to never lay a hand on her again, then bolts toward the manor. Listen closely to this. Never let a fleeting moment of vulnerability blur your personal boundaries. The marble stairs bite like ice as she flees his heavy, piercing gaze. Eats. Safely behind the thick front door, she presses her shaking hands against the wood. Her heart is violently racing. She touches her lips, deeply haunted by the dangerous thrill of the payback. Audrey stumbles into the dark bedroom, deeply questioning her sanity. Was her frantic pulse the rush of revenge, or was it the raw fire of Silvio Gallo claiming her lips? She genuinely cannot untangle the two. A gentle knock echoes. A maid announces that the boss expects her for dinner, but Audrey refuses. She stays behind the locked door, claiming exhaustion. Remember this when you feel overwhelmed. Sometimes choosing quiet isolation is the absolute best way to protect your peace. As the footsteps fade, she drifts toward an antique mirror, slowly tracing her lower lip. She has been kissed before, but this carries a terrifying weight. She tries to blame the pure adrenaline of her world, completely shattering. Then, she notices it sitting perfectly on the bed, a ridiculously expensive, sheer black lace sleep set. She stares at the delicate lace and lets out a dry laugh. Nothing screams peaceful rest after a forced Mafia marriage, quite like scandalous black lingerie. Still, she slides it on, and clear because sleeping in a tight dress is not an option. Life pushes into these corners. Sometimes you simply have to adapt and wear the uncomfortable armor you are dealt. The next morning hits her like a heavy freight train. Audrey blinks awake, staring at a foreign ceiling, hearing the voices of strangers below. Panic claws at her throat as reality sets in. Wearing only that fragile lace, she drags herself out of bed and pulls open the heavy closet doors. The breath leaves her lungs. A massive, brand new wardrobe hangs inside. Every tag is completely untouched. Every garment is pitch black, and somehow, someone knew exactly how they would fit. You and I are going to unpack this together. This is the moment Audrey understands Silvio's control. That sea of black fabric is not a gift. It is his silent way of marking territory. She pulls out a sharp, tailored dress with a plunging neckline and slips it on. Staring into the mirror, the terrified bride is gone. What looks back is a lethal mob wife. Never forget this truth. How you choose to dress can completely rewrite the energy you carry into a battle. She descends the stairs, bracing for Silvio. But he is not there. Waiting at the table with champagne is Aldo, his older brother. He drags his cold eyes up and down her frame, treating her like a pretty package hiding a frightened girl. Does the disrespect burn? Maybe, but Audrey does not flinch. She simply pours her hot coffee, completely unbothered by his toxic little game. Audrey measures the man across the table and throws effortless shade, dryly asking if he is Silvio's twin. Aldo flashes a sickening smirk, bragging he beat his brother into the world by 3 minutes. Audrey takes a slow sip of her coffee. She coldly replies that she assumed the second-born was the bigger one. It is a surgical strike to his ego. Aldo's smile shatters. He leans across the table, asking if the Gallo last name makes her feel dangerous. Audrey does not retreat an inch. She sets her cup down, locks onto his pale eyes, and calmly states she was dangerous long before anyone knew her name. Here is a reminder. Your true power is born from your spirit, never the title you wear. Aldo stares in silence. Unlike Silvio's cold calculation, his gaze is drowning in unhinged greed. He leans closer, ready to strike. Aldo drops his voice into that quiet tone people use when they want to dismantle your confidence. He asks if she knows the details of their father's will. Audrey keeps her face a stone mask. Aldo smiles as he spills the bitter truth. The old Don left the entire Mafia empire to whichever son marries and produces an heir first. It is a sickening twist. Silvio did not rescue her out of romantic chivalry. She was just a pawn, the fastest option to secure his bloody crown. Remember this in your own life. If a sudden rescue looks exactly like a fairy tale, there is always a hidden price tag attached. Audrey swallows the crushing betrayal and coldly claims they have a mutual agreement, but Aldo just smirks. He tells her, if she is truly that smart, she better figure out which brother is actually going to win this war. The tension shatters when an older, fiercely intense man strides into the room. He dismisses Aldo effortlessly, waving him away like a simple intern. He introduces himself to Audrey as Michael Caruso, the man running the family from the shadows for 25 years. As they walk, Michael drops a heavy warning. He tells her to watch her back around Aldo, calling the brother a venomous snake in the grass. Audrey carefully locks that detail into her mind. When they step into the main office, the atmosphere violently shifts. Silvio sits behind a massive desk, radiating ruthless CEO energy. The street warlord with a rifle is gone, replaced by the calculating architect of a dark empire. Listen to me on this. The most dangerous people in this world are the ones who know exactly when to switch their masks and fully adapt to the room. Silvio lifts his eyes from the screen, dissecting her with a cold stare, and tells her to sit. Audrey just stands there. He looks devastatingly handsome, but his eyes are walled off, completely emotionally bankrupt. She refuses to play the quiet wife. Cutting straight through the silence, she brings up the truth of the will. She looks the Mafia boss dead in the eye and calls him out, realizing her son's rescue was just a desperate grab for power. Silvio does not even blink. He does not offer an apology. He flatly admits that if she had not fallen into his lap, he would have married anyone else. He calls her a convenience. That word cuts to the absolute bone. But hear me out tonight. Being someone's convenience might be where your story starts, but it is entirely up to you to adapt, fight back, and become utterly irreplaceable. Welcome to the midnight hour. Let us step into the cold halls of power together, shall we? Audrey sat perfectly still, hands folded, burying the agonizing dread twisting in her chest. Then, why am I here? She asked, her voice slicing the heavy silence. Silvio set his pen down. A sharp, final click, his dark eyes locked onto hers with suffocating weight. Tomorrow, her family was coming to dinner, and she had to sell the lie that this marriage was her happy choice. He stepped close, forcing her to look up. If she failed, Max would unleash the police, tying up his vast empire. The heartbreaking truth here: sometimes the cruelest chains are forged from cold strategy, and you must play the devil's game just to survive the night. The illusion shatters so quietly. Audrey stared at the man she thought was her shield, realizing he was just another monster guarding his empire. Silvio did not flinch at her anger. "You are my business," he told her. No warmth, just raw, unbreakable ownership. Then came the devastating blow that stopped her racing heart dead. That secret, desperate debt her father had taken, Silvio had bought it. He owned her bloodline now. "How did you know?" she whispered, trembling. Silvio merely smiled, a chilling, hollow curve of his lips as he gently lifted her chin. The touch was soft, but the silent threat roared. Fail tomorrow and her family falls. A grim lesson for the quiet hours. Never accept a blind favor from a predator, because counterfeit safety always costs you your soul. The room grew heavy as the dynamic shifted entirely. Silvio loomed over her, a man of calculated authority, clarifying that he does not make threats, he simply manages his property. He ordered her to wear the mask of a fierce empress tomorrow, not a weeping victim. By next week, he swore Max would be stripped of every weapon. Just like that, the moment broke. By 8 in the morning, he was gone, wrapped in a sharp suit, commanding the city through his phone, leaving her to orchestrate a dinner in his dark shadow. You and I can take a profound lesson from this agonizing dance. Confidence is the absolute strongest armor you can forge. Walk into the fire acting like you own the flames, and the world must bow. Refuse to be the victim of your own tragedy. Left behind in that gilded cage, Audrey felt the crushing weight of old money. The estate was a labyrinth of quiet luxury. She counted 5 different staff members gliding past, alongside 2 massive guards carved from stone. Trapped with no phone, no identity, and no money, her real life was suspended across the city. The despair could have swallowed her, but she swallowed her tears instead. Gathering her fractured pride, she marched straight to the towering guard at the iron gates. She declared, her voice trembling yet fierce, that Silvio was dead wrong if he thought she would quietly accept this house arrest. There is a beautiful truth in her defiance. You must stand your ground even when your hands are completely empty. Your mindset is the only true freedom they can never steal. The guard did not give an inch, forcing Audrey back to the suffocating mansion. She stormed into the kitchen, stepping right into a thick, untamed energy. Aldo sat there, bare-chested and scarred, peeling an apple with a gleaming blade. He radiated a dangerous, feral grace. When she snapped at him for lurking, he just smirked, mocking her as the new bride to watch her flinch. But in that bitter tension, Audrey found a glimmer of hope. She needed an escape, and this wild card answered to no one. Staring into his cold eyes, she demanded he drive her to her apartment. The lesson of a desperate heart is quite simple. When the heavy front door is securely deadbolted, you must be brave enough to pry open a shattered side window. Always seek out the unexpected escape route. Aldo swept his gaze over her, chewed an apple slice, and laughed, a dark, hollow sound. Why risk his brother's wrath for her? Audrey playing his game, taunting his safe obedience. His eyes went dead. They were not allies, he coldly stated. She felt the sting, yet masked it beautifully. Turning away, she tossed a bitter command over her shoulder, telling him to put a shirt on unless he was terrified of catching feelings. A genuine laugh echoed behind her. An hour later, as she sat drowning in despair in the garden, a harsh car horn shattered the quiet. Listen closely, my friends, because you and I must remember this truth. Never let cold rejection extinguish your fire. When someone slams the door in your face, you walk away with your head held high and your dignity perfectly intact. She turned toward the sound, her heart skipping a beat. Aldo sat behind the wheel of a menacing black Porsche, its engine purring. When she hesitated, reminding him they were not allies, Aldo offered a deeply fractured smile. He confessed, with toxic delight, that he simply loved making Silvio miserable. Such a broken brotherly bond. At the gates, the guard tried to intervene, but Aldo's harsh command forced them into fold instantly. They tore onto the highway, the wind howling around them as Aldo mocked her, calling her a little bird fleeing her golden cage. The agonizing truth of survival rests exactly here. Sometimes your savior does not care about your bleeding soul at all. They are just playing their own selfish game. do not hesitate to use their dark motives to secure the freedom you desperately need. Audrey was completely done playing the weeping captive. Staring dead ahead, her voice iced over as she warned Aldo she was no one's fragile pet and that Mafia Palace was not her cage. She demanded her clothes. Aldo did not argue. Instead, an amused smirk crept across his face, a terrifying ghost of Silvio's smile. He thrived on the chaos. Without a word, he slammed the gas pedal. The car violently launched forward. Audrey gripped the door handle with white knuckles, praying they would survive, while Aldo let out a wild, breathless laugh. Soon, they screeched to a halt at her old apartment building. Here is a painful truth for the midnight hour. If someone tries to treat you like a helpless bird, you must bare your teeth immediately, or they will gladly keep you locked in the dark forever. Audrey scrambled out, desperate for her sanctuary. But Aldo shadowed her steps like a storm cloud. She ordered him to wait outside. He completely ignored the boundary, murmuring that she could run, though he would never chase a ghost. He stepped right into her tiny, spotless apartment. One quiet bedroom, a humble kitchen, a normal life. Aldo prowled the space, dragging a finger across her bookshelf, softly taunting that this claustrophobic box was her true cage. As Audrey frantically packed her clothes, he inhaled deeply, whispering that the room smelled intoxicatingly sweet. Stick with me through this, listeners. You must never let a toxic soul get comfortable inside your safe space. Once they step over that sacred threshold and breathe your air, tearing them out of your life becomes a total nightmare. The air in that small room grew violently thick. Aldo blocked the doorway, shattering the safe distance. He leaned in, his face brushing close to her hair, his voice dropping to a dark whisper. He noted that the sweet scent was entirely her. Audrey's heart hammered in absolute panic, but she kept her expression carved from ice. Taking a firm step back, she ordered him to sit down. Drawing a strict boundary, Aldo locked onto her with terrifying pale blue eyes, offering a villainous smile before backing away like a satisfied predator. 10 minutes later, she was packed, and he mockingly called her Cinderella, returning to his cell. Here is the tragic truth. When someone pushes the edges of your comfort zone, you must freeze them out instantly. To surrender a single inch of ground is a devastating, fatal mistake. On the street, a rare smile touched Audrey's lips as they traded insults. But peace is fleeting. Two shadowed figures blocked the door. A brutal hand clamped onto her wrist. The man growled that his boss, Gordon, demanded a chat. She fought wildly. In a heartbeat, Aldo morphed from a nuisance into an absolute monster. His voice dropped to a dead flatline, ordering the man to let her go. Before the thug could pivot, Aldo struck with a sickening crack. 2 ruthless hits, and the man collapsed cold. The second goon scrambled for a weapon, only to freeze with the cold steel of Aldo's gun, pressed directly between his eyes. You and I must appreciate this tragic irony. Sometimes, the very demon causing your daily misery is the only one willing to pull the trigger to keep you safe when true darkness falls. Aldo holds the man's terrified gaze, his voice dropping to a dead, freezing calm. He makes it clear nobody lays a finger on a gallows, and Audrey is family now. Then comes the real threat. Silvio might play by a few rules, Aldo whispers, but he has none. The thugs scramble away like stray dogs. Moments later, they are tearing down the asphalt in his Porsche. Aldo steers with one hand, his other resting on the console, knuckles cracked wide open and bleeding from the violence he just unleashed. Audrey cannot tear her eyes from the crimson stains, but Aldo just offers an empty smirk. You and I know a harsh truth of the midnight hours. Talk is cheap, but actions leave scars. A man might play the fool in the daylight, but when the blood spills, you see exactly who he really is. Aldo breaks the heavy silence, teasing her with a bruised grin, asking if she is actually worried about him. Audrey keeps her armor thick. She calmly passes him a napkin, muttering that she just wants to spare the expensive leather from his mess. A genuine, rough laugh tears out of Aldo's throat. He takes the napkin, pulling it tight across his bleeding knuckles with his teeth. Then Audrey finally drops the heavy question. If he wants his brother gone, why save her life? The humor drains from Aldo's face. His jaw sets like stone as he admits he would rather have her in his own debt than trapped by Silvio. Audrey fires back instantly, refusing to be a pawn in either brother's twisted game. There is a quiet lesson burning here. Never accept a savior without reading the fine print. In a world built on power and pain, charity is a ghost story. Every single favor demands a piece of your soul. The Porsche glides up to the iron gates, the fading adrenaline leaving Audrey momentarily at peace. But the second her feet hit the driveway, the night air turns to ice. Silvio stands at the top of the stone steps, a dark storm raging behind his eyes. Every step she takes toward him feels like walking to the gallows. The moment she is in reach, Silvio's fingers lock around her arm. There is no warmth in his touch, only the cold, crushing grip of ownership. He stares straight through Aldo, his voice a low growl, declaring that husband and wife require a private conversation. Aldo just raises his bloodied hands in mock surrender. Silvio pulls her inside, the heavy doors sealing her in. It is a grim reality to face in the dark jealousy. Dressed up as protection is nothing but a prison sentence. When someone treats you like stolen territory, they are not fighting for love. They are demanding control. The heavy click of the study door sounds like a gunshot. Silvio is a coiled spring, his jaw ticking with barely contained fury. He invades her personal space, his voice a lethal whisper as he demands to know why she defied him and got into his brother's car. Audrey retreats until her shoulders hit the cold wall, yet her spirit refuses to break. Silvio slams both palms against the plaster beside her head, caging her in, warning her not to push him, but she holds his gaze, reminding him a signed paper does not purchase her soul. She only left because his men turned the house into a cell. Silvio claims he is keeping her alive, not locking her away. Here is a vital truth for the midnight hours. Standing up to someone trying to break you is terrifying. But if you let a monster force you against the wall today, they will build a permanent cage around you tomorrow. Silvio looms in the shadows, his dark eyes cataloging every tremor in her breath. He insists she is blind to the vicious predators waiting beyond his walls. But Audrey knows exactly where to slide the knife. She throws his pride right back at him, swearing he only cares about his fragile reputation and producing a bloodline heir. She promises, with absolute venom, that she will never share his bed. A twisted, cold amusement dances across Silvio's face. He leans in with agonizing slowness, the space between them evaporating until he is a single breath from her lips. But instead of a kiss, he delivers a calculated strike, whispering that he never desired her anyway. She is simply not his kind of woman. The cruelty is surgical. It is a lonely truth of human nature. When a powerful person goes out of their way to crush your spirit, it only proves they are entirely terrified of your unbending will. The air in the room grows completely suffocating. Silvio trails a calloused thumb along her cheek before dropping the hammer. He tells her she is nothing but a temporary patch to fix a bleeding empire. Then he twists the blade, promising that when he finally builds a true home, it will be with a woman he genuinely loves. It is a devastating, emotional blow designed to hollow her out. But Audrey is made of harder steel. She buries the agonizing sting deep inside, offering him a blank, unnerving calm. She simply agrees, stating she only needed normal clothes to survive this charade. Silvio sweeps his icy gaze over her figure and coldly commands that jeans are strictly forbidden under his roof. Listen closely, never give the monster the privilege of watching you bleed. True power is found in the quiet refusal to shatter when someone deliberately strikes your heart. Silvio Gallo, the reigning king of this nightmare, turns his back to her. His voice is a dead chill as he orders her to wear the dress he chose and play the obedient bride for dinner at 8 o'clock. His final warning, stay away from his brother. He delivers the ultimatum without even granting her a single glance. Audrey flashes a hollow, defiant smile, refusing to break until she is as safely behind closed doors. Once inside her bedroom, the quiet facade crumbles. She tears into her luggage in a blind fury, hurling her fake papers and old clothes onto the mattress. You and I both know the feeling of letting pure rage take the wheel when the walls finally close in. But chaotic anger never builds a solid escape route. She stands over the wreckage, chest heaving, letting the bitter taste of the Gallo legacy poison her mind. Audrey paces the floor, her silent anger echoing in the oppressive quiet of the mansion. Her eyes lock onto the black dress Silvio, left on the bed, a garment slashed dangerously high, meant to parade her as his prize. A dark, bitter smirk touches her lips, not his type. She mutters the words into the empty room, letting the insult fuel her fire. Sometimes, pure, unadulterated spite is the only gasoline a soul needs to keep fighting. Hours later, the estate transforms into a frantic hive. Servants scramble with pale, funereal flowers. While the brothers are nowhere to be found, Audrey descends the grand stairs in worn jeans and a faded sweater, a walking rebellion against his suffocating rules. She pushes through the heavy doors into a cloud of roasted garlic and rosemary. There stands Giorgio, the arrogant head chef, guarding his stove like a loyal soldier. Audrey glares at the menu dictating Silvio's rigid, intimidating dinner plans. She approaches Giorgio with a terrifying calmness, informing him the entire menu is changing. The chef balks, hiding behind the shadow of the boss's strict demands. But Audrey holds her ground. She reminds him that her husband left her to handle the evening. She orders simple braised ribs and vegetables, desperate to offer her parents a meal that feels like warmth rather than a mob intimidation tactic. Here is a beautiful truth. Real hospitality is about offering a safe harbor, not a display of violent wealth. Giorgio glares, warning her the meat requires 4 hours to cook. Audrey does not blink. She tells him to start the fire. He finally surrenders with a heavy sigh. She walks away, having successfully claimed a tiny sliver of territory in a cold house built to break her. The shadows of the sitting room offer no comfort as Audrey agonizes over the impossible lie she must feed her parents. How do you explain marrying into an empire of blood? Michael, Silvio's stoic enforcer, steps silently into the room. He extends a brand new phone, his voice flat as he explains the boss wants her old life disconnected. It is a suffocating leash of control, yet Audrey slips the device into her pocket. Sometimes survival means accepting the chains you cannot currently break. She tries to lighten the gloom, joking about reaching out to old friends. But Michael's face turns to granite. Staring out the darkened window, he delivers a chilling warning. The entire criminal underworld of Providence already knows her name, her past, and the exact vulnerability this sudden, chaotic wedding brings to the brutal Gallo family. Michael's low voice carries the weight of a death threat. Invisible eyes are already tracking her every move. Desperate for a lifeline, Audrey asks if the crushing paranoia of this life ever fades. The old enforcer stares out at the fading light and murmurs a haunting truth. You only lost noticing the prison walls when you finally trust the man who built them. It is a profound lesson in survival, but right now, Audrey wouldn't trust Silvio Gallo to hold a dying match. As the clock strikes 6, the dread becomes a physical ache in her chest. She leans her trembling hands against the heavy oak dresser, struggling to breathe. She survived the altar, she whispers. She can survive the evening. Her eyes fall to the conservative, lifeless dress. Silvio demanded a garment designed to make her look perfectly beautiful while entirely erasing her voice. Just as she contemplates the suffocating dress, a soft knock interrupts her dread. The housekeeper leaves behind a massive box. Audrey rips away the heavy crimson paper, gasping as a river of emerald green satin spills onto the mattress. The gown is a weapon, a scandalous plunging neckline, and a ruthless slit built to command the room. Hidden in the folds is a handwritten note. It orders her to rule the dining table like a reigning queen, promising the deep green will match her eyes and ignite Silvio's rage perfectly. It ends with a single sharp letter. A. Aldo. The brother is playing a deeply dangerous game in the shadows, weaponizing her to sabotage the king's evening. Audrey sits perfectly still, gripping the card. She realizes the fractured loyalty in this bloodline just handed her a loaded gun. The only question left is who will pull the trigger first. She stood before the glass, the silence heavy with agonizing questions. Was Aldo trying to provoke his brother, or was this a twisted game of his own design? Her mind drifted to that cold standoff with Silvio, the bitter struggle to hold her composure when he dismissed her. Now, her trembling fingers brushed the green satin. You and I know that true courage is rarely the absence of fear. It is putting on the revenge dress anyway. She slipped it on, and the mirror offered no lies. The fit was flawless. A calculated strike by Aldo to orchestrate absolute ruin. She applied bold crimson to her lips and fastened the diamond earrings Silvio gave her. If you must start a fire in the dark, you might as well pour gasoline on the flames. The woman staring back was no longer a timid runaway. She did not look like a soul drowning in Mafia debt. She looked like absolute ruin, and a tragic part of her relished it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she drew a ragged breath, tilted her chin, and stepped forward. The sharp click of her heels against the cold marble echoed through the silent mansion. Down in the foyer, the ticking time bomb himself waited. Aldo lounged against the wall with a bitter drink. He tracked the rhythm of her approach before his eyes finally found her. His mocking smirk vanished instantly. He scanned her from head to toe, paralyzed by the emerald satin. A quiet curse slipped from his lips. His voice dropped to a hollow whisper as he confessed he knew the color would suit her. But he had never anticipated she would walk downstairs looking like a beautiful, unforgivable crime. Aldo closed the distance, his voice a mocking whisper. He reminded her his brother demanded an obedient bride. A wild gleam danced in his eyes as he warned her she was an instrument of devastation. He raised his glass in a bitter toast to the tragic Cinderella. Audrey held his gaze, refusing to let him see her bleed, and swept past him. Silvio sat at the head of the table, the king of his dark empire. At the sound of the door, he turned. Every syllable died in his throat. His hardened features locked down, burying the violent shock crashing through his mind. He slowly rose to his feet. Audrey walked directly toward him, commanding the agonizing silence. Silvio did not blink once, entirely consumed by the sight of her in that unforgiving dress. Silvio could not tear his eyes away from the plunging neckline. His knuckles turned bone white, gripping the mahogany table, fighting an internal war. She stopped in front of him, entirely unapologetic. His voice was rough, pointing out this was not the dress she left upstairs. Audrey channeled a devastating power, looking him dead in the eye to say she despised the other one. Aldo strolled in, swallowing a laugh, as he noted how perfectly the silk matched her eyes. Silvio shot his brother a glare carrying a death sentence. Suddenly, the doorbell shattered the heavy tension. Listen closely, because sometimes the greatest shield against a man who craves control is unwavering confidence. Silvio drew a slow, ragged breath, burying his furious agony beneath a cold mask, and stepped forward. Silvio slammed his palm against the small of her back. Through the satin, she felt the ruthless pressure of his fingers. He leaned in, delivering a velvet threat. He demanded she smile, promising a dark, private conversation about her dress later. But Audrey did not crumble. She offered a radiant smile that belonged entirely to her, slipping away from his grip just as the doors swung open. Her father stepped inside. He was a humble man, but his eyes immediately locked onto the armed men in the hall. A simple truth, for you never underestimate a parent's quiet intuition when their child is in peril. Arthur sensed the tragic reality hiding behind the luxury, feeling the danger deep in his bones. Right before Martha cried out and rushed to her daughter, Martha threw her arms around Audrey. Audrey breathed in the tragic scent of home before her mother pulled back, eyes wide with terror. Martha whispered, begging to know if these men were holding her prisoner. Audrey softly insisted she was free, but a mother knows her child's lies. Suddenly, Silvio flipped a psychological switch that was terrifying to witness. He glided forward as the flawless host, greeting Arthur with deep respect and pressing a kiss to Martha's hand. Moments ago, he was drowning in violent rage over a dress. Now, he played the devoted son-in-law to perfection. When a man seamlessly alters his personality to manipulate a room, do not ignore it. That is not charm. It is the dark warning sign of a predator. The masquerade continued. Silvio wrapped a possessive arm around Audrey's waist, assuring her parents it was an honor to host them. Aldo strolled from the shadows, offering a dangerous welcome. When Martha noted the resemblance between the twins, Audrey whispered coldly that they did not look alike to her at all. Aldo flashed a smirk, while Silvio's fingers dug ruthlessly into her side. 10 agonizing minutes later, dinner was served. But Arthur had no interest in pleasantries. He stared Silvio dead in the eyes, his voice like iron, demanding to know how this stranger married his daughter overnight. The lesson is simple. A true father is blind to expensive marble floors and endless wealth. His only genuine concern is protecting his blood from the wolves at the door. Silvio rested his hand on Audrey's bare shoulder. He asked Arthur if he believed in love at first sight, swearing he never did until he found Audrey. Arthur remained an unmovable stone. Silvio turned to his bride, asking if she felt that magic. Audrey forced a fragile smile. Then, Aldo chose violence. He brutally pointed out she was already wearing a wedding dress when they met, laughing that swapping her old groom for Silvio was an efficiency move. A suffocating silence consumed the room. Silvio froze for one heartbeat. His eyes locked onto his twin with the cold of a winter grave, stating that Aldo treats romance like a cold procedure. You and I know how this goes. When toxic family members try to ignite dramatic fires, maintaining absolute composure is your most lethal weapon. The tension was sharp enough to cut glass. Silvio assured her parents he refused to leave Audrey with a loser like Max. Desperate to lighten the mood, Martha forced a nervous laugh, recalling how Audrey found impossible hiding spots as a child. Aldo stared at the emerald dress and winked. He told her mother that this time she hid in a fortress, and the man who found her was a literal dragon. Beneath the tablecloth, Silvio seized Audrey's hand with aggressive force, his thumb digging into her palm. He muttered darkly that dragons never share their treasure. Here is a bitter truth. Sometimes you must play along with the monster just to survive the night. Instead of pulling away, Audrey leaned into the danger. She smiled with heartbreaking sweetness, agreeing with him completely. Audrey looked at her mother and dropped a beautiful trap. She swore she was in safe hands, especially since her dress featured such complicated clasps. Beneath the table, Silvio's body went rigid. His thumb stopped dead. Audrey just leaned into her role, gushing about how attentive her husband was. Martha absorbed the lie, her face softening with relief, but Aldo let out a sharp laugh, instantly recognizing her dangerous game. Audrey smiled with lethal innocence, complaining it took 15 minutes to fasten the 20 clasps, making it impossible to dress herself. Next to her, Silvio was boiling alive, his crushing hers in a furious vice. True power is keeping your enemy smiling while you quietly set their rulebook ablaze. At the end of the table, Arthur just watched in silence. Silvio finally broke from his fury, his voice tight as he suggested they moved to dessert. Later, as her parents prepared to leave, Audrey fought to keep her fake smile from shattering. By the grand doors, her mother pulled her into a desperate embrace, begging her to visit tomorrow alone. Audrey wanted to confess that the marble floors and emerald silk were just the walls of a terrifying prison, but his men were watching. She swallowed her agonizing fear and promised to call. Martha desperately searched her daughter's eyes, hunting for the truth buried beneath the lipstick. You and I know this well. Your parents will always see through your brave mask, no matter how flawless your performance is. Arthur stood in silent, helpless worry as the heavy front door clicked shut, sealing her inside the dark. The oak door clicks shut, and the mansion seems to exhale a tired breath. Audrey freezes, her mother's frantic warnings ringing in her ear. She turns slowly to find both brothers waiting. Aldo wears a twisted smirk, treating her survival like a late-night game show. But Silvio is a different kind of storm. His eyes are pitch black, fixed on her with a quiet violence that highlights the fragile clasps trailing down her spine. She lifts her chin, swallowing the fear, and forces a hollow joke about the dinner. Aldo chuckles from the shadows. You know, sometimes the absolute bravest thing a person can do is recognize a losing battle and simply walk away. She mutters a brief goodnight, slipping past the men before the room ignites. Audrey rushes up the staircase and, abandoning her polite grace, Aldo's cruel laughter echoes below. Silvio's silence wraps around her throat like a snare. She slams her door, breathing hard. This gorgeous emerald gown suddenly feels like a custom-built cage. She twists her arms, clawing at the metal clasps down her spine. Her trembling fingers slip against the silk, and one hook refuses to give. Just as she thinks she is safe, a heavy fist strikes the wood. The door swings open, and Silvio steps inside. The refined dinner host is entirely gone. His jacket is discarded, his sleeves rolled up to reveal dark intentions. It is a harsh truth we all must face. The real danger is never the shouting man. It is the quiet one who no longer needs to speak. The room turns heavy, and Silvio radiates a suffocating heat from across the rug. The veins in his forearms pulse with barely contained fury. He catches her eyes in the vanity mirror, and the flutter in her stomach turns to panic. His dark stare drops to her trapped hand, analyzing the unbroken line of clasps down her spine. Defeated, she lets her arm fall. Silvio clicks the door shut with slow deliberation. He steps into her space, a gravelly whisper noting she appears to need assistance. She shakes her head, denying it, but he reads her like glass. He glides behind her, trapping her against the wood. Life strips away our pride when we need it most. We can lie to the world, but trembling hands always confess the truth. For an agonizing moment, he does not reach for the fabric. He simply stands behind her, watching the furious blush rise to her cheeks in the mirror. His low voice breaks the silence, accusing her of wearing his brother's color just to test his limits. Audrey raises her chin, trying to project a courage she does not feel. But the man is unbothered. Slowly, his large hand sweeps her hair over one shoulder. The rough knuckles graze her neck and she shivers violently, hating herself for the reaction. A sharp snap echoes in the quiet room. He opens the top clasp, his breath warm against her skin, whispering how she paraded with the enemy. Another snap drops the silk, lower. Sometimes, our deepest scars come from the burning touch of someone we know we should flee from. That phantom graze is more devastating than a firm grip. Another sharp click echoes in the quiet room. He is furious she let his brother stare at her all evening. But Audrey is done playing the victim. She meets his dark gaze in the glass, reminding him he made it perfectly clear she was not his type. The untouchable boss completely freezes, the silence turning into a suffocating weight. She pushes further, asking why touching her seems to cause him physical pain. He offers no defense. Instead, his fingertips ghost down her exposed spine, leaving a trail of fire. He leans close to her ear to deliver his dark truth. It is a tragic flaw in human nature. We often seek to break the delicate things we are secretly terrified of keeping. Today, you and I are going to unpack this moment. Silvio unhooks the final clasp, and the heavy satin pulls silently at her feet. Audrey gasps, instinctively crossing her arms over her chest. He does not retreat. He traces an agonizing path from her bare shoulder down to her trembling hands. Her legs can barely support her weight. He leans in, his jaw brushing her temple, delivering a whisper that will haunt her for years. He tells her to sleep well and dream of everything he chose not to do. Without another word, he walks out, leaving her shivering in the cold room. The lesson here is profound. True power is never about violently seizing what you desire. Real strength is having the self-control to walk away, letting the empty space do the destruction. The door clicks shut, and Audrey collapses onto the mattress. Desperate for air, she hides under the blankets, trying to sleep off the poison of this underworld boss. But the silence of the old mansion offers no mercy. She tosses and turns in the dark, yet all she can see is his shadowed face. She remembers the slide of the dress, the terrifying reality of being at his mercy, and that final whisper commanding her to dream of his restraint. It is a vicious psychological strategy. Sometimes, the most destructive thing a dangerous man can do is absolutely nothing at all. It hollows you out, leaving you fighting a ghost you cannot touch. She lies there, burning with frustration, outmaneuvered by a man who already left the room. Audrey stares at the dark ceiling, her mind spiraling into madness. She tries to focus elsewhere, desperate to scrub Silvio's lingering presence from her skin. She tells herself she is in control, hoping to beat the crime lord at his own psychological game. But the attempt only pulls her deeper into the trap. The memory crashes over her. She vividly recalls the exact moment his calloused hand simply stopped moving. His terrifying self-restraint leaves her hollowed out by her own unmet expectations. She sits up abruptly, gasping for air and furious at her weakness. Let this be a warning. You can never fight fire with fire when the devil owns the matchbox. She is dancing perfectly to his cruel tune, and the bitter realization makes her hate him more. Let us be honest for a second. We both know a dangerous part of her prayed he would walk back through that door. She sits up in the tangled sheets, heart hammering against her ribs, terrified by her own desires. The next morning brings a devastating shift. Normally, she throws on faded jeans, a quiet rebellion to show she refuses to fit into their gilded cage. But today, her hands bypass the denim. She pulls out a sleek, tailored black dress. It lacks the provocation of the emerald gown, but the intention is clear. It is a quiet truth of human nature. The second you alter your armor to catch the eye of the monster, you have already lost the war. She stares at her reflection, desperately, pretending she is immune to his gravity. But the glass refuses to lie. She applies dark lipstick, enduring a brutal moment of self-reflection. Why paint herself for a ruthless syndicate leader who plays with her sanity? Swallowing her pride, she descends the stairs. Nerves brace to face Silvio, but the dining room is empty of his shadow. She finds only Michael, his stoic enforcer, and Aldo, lounging like a snake. Michael quietly mentions the boss departed before dawn for a 3-day trip. Audrey forces a polite nod, but her stomach plummets into an icy void. Her disappointment is agonizing. Here is a piece of advice for the heavy-hearted. If you tumble into the dark with a predator, you must master your poker face. Aldo smirks over his black coffee, reading her shattered expectations like the Sunday paper. She is completely exposed. Audrey tries to shrug off the news, but Aldo thrives on her misery. He leans back with a cruel smirk, mocking the heartbreak written plainly on her face. Humiliated, she snaps back, ordering a car to take her far away to see her mother. Michael, ever the disciplined ghost, simply nods and prepares the black sedan. Truthfully, she just needs to flee the crushing emptiness Silvio left behind in those halls. The tires barely stop moving before Martha pulls her inside, locking the door as if the devil is giving chase. You know, a mother's instinct is a terrifyingly accurate compass. Martha aggressively slams an iron kettle onto the stove, hands visibly trembling. She senses the suffocating underworld rot clinging to her daughter's soul. Completely consumed by panic, they sit across from each other at the scuffed kitchen table. The quiet room only makes Martha's piercing stare feel heavier. She leans in, demanding to know if this crime boss is treating her properly. Instantly, Audrey's mind betrays her. A memory flashes bright, his large hands gripping her waist, the suffocating tension burning in the study. She fumbles her words, stammering that the arrangement is complicated, insisting she is not a prisoner. But Martha's eyes remain hard, piercing the hollow defense. It is a fundamental truth of this world. You can lie to your enemies or the syndicate, but you cannot deceive the woman who gave you life. Martha sees the invisible chains. She knows how deeply this dark man has already buried himself inside her daughter's mind. Welcome back to the midnight hour. Let's look at this exact moment together, you and I, because this is where the quiet desperation finally shatters. Martha pushes, demanding to know what this dangerous Don truly means to her. Audrey stands there, 100 safe empty lies resting on her tongue. She could call him a shield, a simple transaction in the dark. Instead, she exhales and surrenders the heaviest truth of all. She loves him. The kitchen goes dead silent. The air just stops. Martha crumbles, taking Audrey by the hands, pleading with her not to let the world steal the meaning of that love. We see it so often in this life. Keeping a massive truth buried inside your chest is like holding a lit match. Eventually, the flame burns down and the fire will catch when you least expect it. Audrey's car tires crunch against the long gravel driveway of the massive estate, but the shadows feel completely different tonight. Without Silvio's terrifying, suffocating presence, The house is just an empty tomb. God help her, but she actually misses the man. Seeking breath, she wanders down to the private beach, letting the salt wind bite at her face. But peace never lasts in this world. Footsteps drag through the sand, and Aldo steps into the pale light. He isn't wearing his usual mobster armor. He is draped in soft white linen, the ocean breeze making him look like a tragic, fallen angel. Listen closely to the midnight wind on this one. The men who wear the brightest halos in the blinding daylight are usually the exact same ones pulling you into the absolute darkest depths after the sun goes down. She refuses to let him see her tremble. Audrey meets his gaze with pure ice, asking if he always makes a habit of stalking his brother's accidental brides. Aldo just offers that slow smirk, sinking into the cold sand beside her. Then she crosses the line. She asks about their mother. In a heartbeat, the easygoing playboy vanishes. Aldo's eyes go completely hollow, his voice dropping to a dead, rehearsed whisper as he states she died, bringing them into the world. He claims they never cared. It is a practiced lie to numb the agony. It is a tragedy we all face in the dark. The people who parade around with untouchable, heartless armor are always the ones bleeding from the oldest wounds. That massive empire was not built on power. It was built entirely on a foundation of unspoken grief. The pieces of the broken puzzle finally fit together in Audrey's mind. Silvio's suffocating need for absolute control is not about dominance. 35 years ago, losing his mother taught a frightened boy that the second your grip slips, the people you love slip away into the earth. Her terrifying husband is nothing but a walking fortress of unhealed sorrow. But then the wind shifts. Aldo, the brother who thrives on poison, slowly reaches out. His hand trembles as he softly brushes a stray strand of hair from Audrey's cheek. No cynical jokes, no twisted smiles, just the crushing weight of two lost souls recognizing each other. Trauma might build the most impenetrable walls around a bleeding heart, but sometimes one quiet moment of genuine tenderness is enough to shatter them completely. Audrey refuses to retreat. She looks straight into the depths of Aldo's eyes and confesses that she thought he absolutely despised her. Aldo tries to slip his mask back on, casually waving away 35 years of agonizing trauma, murmuring that hate is an awfully heavy word to carry, but Audrey holds her ground. She stares this dangerous man down and swears her absolute loyalty to Silvio, declaring it a bond stronger than their cold arrangement. For one terrible second, the Joker vanishes. Aldo stares at her with a chilling, dead calm and whispers a warning for her to tread carefully. It is a hard truth we all have to swallow. Loyalty is a beautifully noble trait, but blindly trusting a world held together by blood and lies is exactly how a gentle soul ends up burning to ash. The dining room feels like a mausoleum tonight. Let's step into this suffocating silence together, you and I. Silvio is a ghost, his empty chair at the head of the table radiating an ominous chill. Even Aldo is hollowed out, pushing his food around, unable to meet Audrey's eyes. As the second course arrives, Audrey feels the walls of this golden cage closing in. She turns to Michael, the faithful butler, and declares she is done rotting away in silk sheets. Michael gently offers the standard illusions of freedom, afternoon rides, shopping trips, and lunch with armed guards. But listen to the late-night truth. Having all the wealth in the universe is just another form of absolute poverty if your soul has no real purpose to wake up for in the cold morning light. Audrey shatters the quiet, refusing to be dressed up like a porcelain doll. She turns down the hollow luxuries, demanding real work where she does not have to beg a ghost for permission. Suddenly, the old Aldo bleeds back into the room. He laughs, mocking her like a naive child playing make-believe while the king is away. But Audrey does not shrink. She fires right back across the table, warning him that he is playing a terrifyingly dangerous game by pulling her so close. To stop the room from erupting into war, Michael quietly steps in, explaining the family's web of legitimate operations. It is the raw truth of the human spirit. Fighting for your own independence will always be infinitely better than slowly fading away inside a comfortable, golden cage. Audrey refuses to let her spirit be locked away like a forgotten trophy. Seeing her quiet desperation, Michael carefully suggests a role in client relations, managing the high society galas. Aldo leans back with a dark grin, joking that she will turn the charity tables into a battlefield. But Audrey anchors herself, accepting the heavy title of Special Projects Liaison. Then, Michael makes his fatal error. He gently reminds her that they must wait for the Don's blessing. Audrey's eyes turn to flint. She flat out refuses to let her absent husband pull her strings from the shadows. You have to admire that defiant fire burning in her chest. If you spent your entire life waiting for someone else to give you permission to step forward, you will simply fade away forever at the starting line. Audrey delivers a masterclass in defiance. She states coldly that asking Silvio makes it a question of permission, but walking through those doors tomorrow makes it an undeniable fact. Aldo leans forward, intoxicated by the chaos, whispering that stubborn facts are exactly what ignite bloody family wars. When dawn breaks, Audrey stands before the Gallo Empire headquarters. It isn't some damp underground basement. It is a towering monolith of cold glass and sharp steel. The sterile, corporate perfection of the place only makes the hidden violence feel infinitely more terrifying. It is a haunting midnight realization for all of us. The most inescapable traps in this heavy life are never built from rusted iron bars. They are perfectly polished, completely invisible glass doors. The second her heels click against the marble lobby, a suffocating wave of silent terror washes over the room. Employees scramble, looking away, paralyzed by the weight of the Don's wife walking among them. Aldo grins like a shark, trying to push her toward the event's vision, teasing that she is built for controlled disasters. But Michael cuts through the noise to reveal the heartbreaking truth. This corporate role is just another cage, keeping her visible to the public, but completely blind to the family's dark operations. Silvio is isolating her because his fractured soul cannot trust a single living person to protect her. It is the tragic irony of absolute power. You can build a fortress of glass and hire an army, but a mind poisoned by paranoia will never allow you to find real peace. The atmosphere at the elevators turns incredibly heavy. Aldo casually waves off the anxious butler, stepping in to escort Audrey himself. She tries to mask her racing pulse, pretending she is fine being trapped with the family's most unpredictable demon. As the steel doors slide shut, the oxygen simply vanishes. She builds a wall of ice, claiming this is a professional visit. Aldo does not blink. He just leans against the mirror, his dark smirk radiating pure, menacing heat. With every floor they ascend, the quiet grows more agonizing. She thought escaping to the corporate tower would leave the toxic family venom behind. But here is the cold midnight truth. You can run to the highest penthouse in the city, but your deepest, darkest demons will always ride the elevator right up with you. Let's step back, you and I. Over the next 3 days, Audrey realizes this corporate machine is agonizingly hollow. The staff walks on eggshells, treating her like a fragile explosive. Desperate for meaning, she buries herself in organizing the Harbor Foundation Gala, trying to bring life to an event for untouchable elites. As she stares at the lifeless black tablecloths and predictable auctions, a familiar, crushing weight settles on her chest. It is the exact same suffocating prison she felt when Silvio dictated her meals back at the mansion. It is a quiet tragedy we must all confront in the dark, playing it perfectly safe, and following every rigid rule might build you a comfortable existence, but it will inevitably bleed every single ounce of fire right out of your soul. Audrey stepped into that room and completely shattered the illusion. She looked at their fragile arrangements and called them exactly what they were: useless. The silence was heavy, like a breath held right before a storm. She stood her ground. If you want their money, she warned, make them feel the weight of those struggling families. The air shifted, and her plan for the Harbour daughters took root. Michael watched from the shadows while Aldo failed to hide his intrigue. You and I have seen this happen before. When you finally recognize your own worth, you stop waiting for an invitation. You pull up a chair, speak the brutal truth, and force the room to adjust to your presence. Respect is never handed down to those who ask for permission. Aldo trailed her with a cynical smirk, murmuring that playing powerful men was a dangerous game. Audrey did not blink. She stared back and reminded him that he thrived on danger. Later, she returned to the estate, exhaustion pulling at her bones. But as the car stopped, the air thickened. Silvio had returned. He was not hidden in some gilded office. He stood in the harsh ocean wind, sleeves rolled back, gripping a heavy shotgun. With terrifying precision, he shattered targets from the grey sky. It is a striking image that carries a cold truth. No matter how high you climb, never let comfort soften your edges. Even when you rule the empire, you must keep your aim sharp. The world owes you absolutely nothing. To survive the long night, you must always remain a dangerous force. Audrey held her breath as the blast of the shotgun echoed across the water, the sound settling deep in her bones. She forced her hands to steady, adjusting her lipstick in the dark glass before stepping out of the car. Her heart hammered against her ribs, yet she walked forward with her head high. Silvio did not bother to turn. He methodically reloaded, destroyed another target, and let the silence stretch. Only then did he slowly turn those cold eyes onto her, sweeping over her frame with an intensity that burned the oxygen from the air. You and I can learn a lot from that heavy stillness. True power never raises its voice. It never rushes to fill the empty space. Real authority lives in the quiet patience of holding your ground and forcing the world to come to you. Audrey stepped closer, breathing in the sharp scent of gunpowder and dark cologne. Silvio tested her, his low voice asking what title she had claimed for herself. She did not waver. She met his gaze and declared her role in special projects, proving this was no empty vanity position. She braced herself for his anger, expecting him to punish her defiance. Instead, the Mafia boss simply raised his weapon and blew another target into dust. When she questioned his calmness, a dark smirk finally touched his lips. He confessed he actually preferred a woman driven by real purpose. There is a profound lesson hidden there. People of true influence will only ever respect you when you carve out your own space with bare hands, rather than begging for scraps in their shadow. Silvio let his gaze drag over her dark dress, murmuring that he admired a woman with purpose, especially one carrying his name. The words hung heavy with consuming heat. Before Audrey could catch her breath, he ordered her to take the weapon. She confessed she had never fired one. He just whispered that he knew. Stepping right behind her, he wrapped his arms around hers to brace the heavy steel, his chest pressing against her spine. The air sparked with overwhelming tension. He did not posture for control, he simply owned the space. Think about the lesson hidden here. You never need to shout to prove your strength. Absolute, unshakable confidence acts as a silent gravity, drawing the entire world into your orbit without a single forceful action. Silvio leaned close, his voice a dark rumble against her ear as he told her to stay loose. The second his hand settled on her waist, her focus completely shattered. Electricity shot through her ribs. He ordered her to breathe, pressing his palm against her stomach through the thin fabric. She fought a desperate battle just to remain upright. He told her to watch the target, but her mind was drowning in the agonizing memory of their shared tension. Always remember this vital lesson in survival. Never let the intoxicating heat of a fleeting moment blind you to the real objective waiting ahead. His fingers curled over hers to adjust her grip, turning the air impossibly heavy. When she finally pulled the trigger, the violent recoil almost knocked her down, but he was already there to hold her steady. The clay disc exploded in the sky, turning to absolute dust. Audrey spun around breathless, a wild smile on her face. Silvio did not even glance at the target. His piercing blue eyes were locked entirely on her. His voice dropped low as he praised her, quietly claiming her as his own. Her mind fractured in that second. He pressed a slow, burning kiss to her neck, stealing her strength. Yet, in a sudden shift, the cold boss returned. He took the weapon, stepped back, and calmly stated he had calls to make, walking off as if he had not just ruined her sanity. There is a vital wisdom to remember here. You must always guard your composure, especially when life sweeps the ground from under you. He cast one mocking look at her dress, noted how busy she seemed, and simply vanished. He stalked toward the mansion, leaving Audrey to the cold wind. She could still feel the phantom heat of his palm burning her skin, but his sudden absence was suffocating. Then, the brutal truth struck her. For 3 days she had not been hoping for an escape. She had been waiting for his return. That evening, she walked into the dining room, bracing to face him. The room was heavy, with old wealth, flickering candles, and staff drifting like ghosts. Yet, both Silvio and his toxic brother had empty chairs at the table. You and I know the danger of anticipation. Never let unchecked expectations govern your reality, because people will always rewrite the script. She should have felt pure relief with those dangerous men gone. Instead, a hollow ache settled deep in her chest. The dining room felt painfully hollow. Michael caught her lingering gaze. With a stiff bow, the butler stated the boss and his brother had left for the city on business. Audrey felt her blood run cold. The absolute audacity. Silvio vanishes for days, returns long enough to brand her with a kiss, and then ghosts her for dinner. She picked up her fork. Fighting the bitter irritation burning under her skin, she needed a harsh reality check. She had bound herself to a Mafia phantom for a cold contract, not a love story. Listen to the warning hidden in her anger. Never allow yourself to romanticize a transactional deal, or you will be the only one left bleeding. Realizing she was staring at an empty chair like a forgotten, desperate bride, her throat tightened with suffocating shame. The memory of her terrible ex drifted into her mind. She felt no longing, only deep embarrassment. Max used to shrink her down, keeping her around only when convenient. Healing was easy once his illusion shattered, but Silvio was a darker beast. He awakened a terrifying hunger inside her, making her crave things she had no right to demand. Disgusted, she pushed her plate away and fled. When dawn broke, she made her move. Snatching his black credit card, she chose the chaotic city over her gilded cage. Remember this simple truth. The best way to reclaim your power is to force your own momentum instead of waiting in the shadows. She secured her guards and refused to ask where her husband went. Escaping the estate before the Mafia king even realized she was gone felt like absolute victory. Audrey walked out looking like a force of nature, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes. If Silvio wanted a flawless Mafia bride, he would bleed cash for the costume. By noon, the boutiques treated her like royalty. When his black card caught the light, the world bowed. She gave in and found the ultimate weapon, a blood cherry dress that radiated dangerous wealth. It did not whisper for attention, it violently demanded it. Staring at her reflection, she made a choice. You and I must learn this crucial truth. Always define your own identity before someone else assigns one to you. Black was Silvio's cold control. Green was his brother's toxic game. But that fierce, undeniable red, that was entirely hers. She bought the dress, the shoes, and a brilliantly petty bag to drive the point home. It is past midnight, and the estate feels heavy with unspoken tension. Audrey walks through those grand doors, her arms full of more designer bags than anyone could ever need. Aldo and Silvio are watching from the shadows of the staircase. Aldo throws a joke about retail therapy, but Audrey is pure ice. She does not even blink. She fires back that she just discovered her husband's credit card has absolutely no limit. Silvio steps forward, his voice a cold rumble. He tells her the limit exists. She just did not have the nerve to spend enough to find it. She just turns and struts up those stairs, turning her room into a luxury fortress. The lesson here is quiet but heavy. Sometimes, you have to walk into a room and completely claim the oxygen, because real confidence is the one currency a limitless card can never buy. Upstairs, the heat of the bathwater is a small comfort in a life moving way too fast. Audrey lays out a stunning cherry red dress, stepping into the foam to wash off the exhaustion of this dangerous world. But the quiet never lasts. The heavy door swings open, and there he is, Silvio. Suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up like a man who just finished handling very dark business. His eyes scan the scattered bags, the crimson fabric, before finally locking onto her in the water. Her heart is hammering, but she sits there, wearing a mask of absolute calm, like this was exactly her design. And maybe that is the truest lesson of survival. When life kicks the door down and catches you vulnerable, you never let them see your hands shake. You just hold your ground and make them believe you held the keys all along. He leans casually against the doorframe, letting the name roll off his tongue. Audrey Gallo. She snaps that he needs to learn how to knock. But this man operates on a different frequency. He smoothly replies that she should learn to answer so he does not have to worry. She wants to be furious, but the unspoken tension is thick enough to choke on. She asks if vanishing all day is a twisted Mafia husband tradition. He just flashes a dark smirk and asks if burning cash at luxury boutiques is hers. Then his tone drops entirely. Be ready by 7. Tonight is their very first public appearance at the gala. Here is a solid truth. Real power is never about who screams the loudest or makes a desperate scene. True power is keeping your heart rate steady and holding unbroken eye contact when the stakes are pushing you to the absolute edge. Audrey lifts her chin, proudly stating she picked her own dress. Silvio does not miss a beat. He murmurs that he already knows, which completely gets under her skin. Without another word, he gestures toward a small velvet box on the vanity. Diamonds. He bought them without ever seeing the red silk she planned to wear. She looks at him, baffled, asking how he could possibly buy jewelry for a dress he had not even seen. Silvio holds her gaze, his expression unreadable, and says he knows exactly what the color red needs. When she demands an answer, he delivers a single heavy word, restraint. Then he is gone, leaving her alone with a racing pulse. The takeaway here is profound. You do not always need to see the entire canvas to understand what the painting lacks. Sometimes, the quietest, most subtle touch speaks volumes more than screaming for the spotlight. 7 o'clock arrives, and the shadows in the estate seem to part just for her. Audrey steps out in that cherry red fabric, looking less like a wife and more like a beautifully lethal weapon. The diamonds Silvio left her sit cold against her collarbone, catching the low light. She takes a slow breath and starts down the grand staircase. Aldo is waiting at the bottom, and for once, the guy with endless sarcastic jokes goes totally quiet. That silence is heavy. But Audrey is only looking at Silvio. The boss stands completely frozen, his dark eyes tracking every inch of that dress. The ice, the matching crimson on her lips. It is a moment pulled straight from a classic film. The lesson is undeniable. When you finally step into your full power, you never have to force a reaction. Your sheer presence is heavy enough to silence the loudest people in the room. Down at the bottom of those stairs, the air is thick enough to cut. Silvio murmurs that her dress is perfect, and Audrey whispers back that he chose as well too. Just as that magnetic pull between them threatens to spark stepped. The Kaza, but then he drops a heavy shadow over the evening. Max Gordon, the toxic ex who broke her, is on the guest list. Audrey freezes, her fingers instinctively tightening around Silvio's arm. Aldo mutters that things are about to get ugly, but Silvio does not even flinch. He just places his large hand over hers and says 2 cold words. Let it. Listen closely, because we all face this. You can never control when the bitter ghosts of your past decide to show up and rattle your cage. But when you build a foundation of real loyalty, you can look that history in the eye and absolutely bury it. The second the car door opens, the flashbulbs hit them like a violent storm. It is a chaotic sea of screaming reporters and heavy mob security pushing back the tide. The moment Silvio hits the red carpet, every lens pivots. Smoothly, almost dangerously, his hand slides flat against Audrey's bare back. It is a deeply territorial move, claiming her silently while the whole city watches. Audrey lifts her chin, letting the diamonds shine, her red dress trailing like liquid fire. In her head, she is still trying to convince herself this is just a transaction, a hollow Mafia arrangement. But you and I both know the truth about playing a role. Here is the reality. You can wear a mask all night and pretend you are just surviving a game, but the bold, fierce energy you project to the world is exactly the life you are going to end up living. In the middle of all that blinding chaos, Silvio leans down and presses his lips against the curve of her neck. The press line absolutely erupts. It is a calculated, devastating move to show the city they are an unbreakable front. He pulls back just enough to whisper against her ear, telling her to smile. She mutters back that she already is. But then his fingers slowly trace the line of her spine, sending a visible shiver right through her, and he whispers, "Now you are." Before she can recover, a reporter screams a question. Did Silvio marry Max Gordon's runaway bride on the exact day she left him at the altar? The entire red carpet goes dead quiet. It is a nasty hit, but here is the truth of it. People will always try to drag you backwards by your messiest chapters in your face. The only way to win is to hold your sharpest smile and never let them see you bleed. You can almost feel the old panic rising in Audrey's chest, cold and familiar. But Silvio does not even blink. He simply pulls her closer, cementing them as an impenetrable wall. With absolute winter in his veins, he looks the reporter dead in the eye and states that his wife simply walked away from a man who was never worthy of her. When the crowd pushes back, Silvio ends it. He declares that while Max lost a fiancée, he gained a woman The city will remember for her greatness, not some cheap scandal. Audrey is paralyzed, not by the cameras, but because a man is finally elevating her instead of hiding her. The crowd actually parts to let them through. Let me tell you what a real partnership looks like. A true partner never scatters when your ugly history hits the news. They stand like a fortress, flip the script, and force the whole world to respect your name. Now, let us step inside this ballroom, because what happens next is a masterclass in shifting power. Audrey did not just salvage this broken Mafia charity gala in 3 days. She completely resurrected it. She tore down the soulless corporate art and hung gritty, beautiful portraits of the harbor workers. She tossed the boring sponsor lists and opened the night with pure, raw humanity, and the heavy hitters are already opening their wallets. Silvio is standing near the bar, totally immobilized, watching his wife orchestrate the room with the cold, precise grace of someone who was underestimated for way too long. Listen to me on this one. When the world tries to force you into a tiny, comfortable box, do not just politely step out of it. You tear that miserable box to pieces and use the wood to build yourself an entirely new stage. Eventually, Audrey finds her way back to the boss. He is just studying her, absorbing the red silk, the heavy diamonds, the completely untouchable aura she is projecting. The time comes, and Silvio steps up to the microphone. The room braces for the usual dry speech about corporate legacy and family honor. But Silvio ignores his notes. He looks right over the heads of the city's elite, finds Audrey standing in the shadows, and drops absolute truth. He admits that this night was supposed to be a hollow display of wealth, but Mrs. Gallo changed the rules. Hi, he tells them, she took a fake performance and injected it with real blood and purpose. The takeaway here is beautiful. You do not need a perfect facade to command a room. Just strip away the lies, show them something completely authentic, and the right people will always bow to your hustle. Let the weight of this sink in. Silvio leans into the mic and says, I gave her a room full of powerful people, but she gave them a reason to feel human. The ballroom erupts. Glasses are raised. The applause is deafening, but Audrey hears none of it. She is locked on Silvio's face. The cold glare of a boss is gone. In its place is raw, unguarded pride, and that single look shatters her defenses. She knows how to fight cruelty, but genuine respect leaves her paralyzed. Off in the corner, Aldo watches the dynamic shift, and right as the moment peaks, a cold shadow falls over her shoulder. Her trash ex, Max Gordon, has found her. You and I both know how this works. The very second you start claiming your peace, the ghosts of your past will crawl out of the dark to test your new boundaries. Never let them burn down the empire you just built. Welcome back to the midnight hour. Let's step right into the tension of the ballroom. Audrey turns slowly, keeping Max in the full view of the crowd so he can't try anything unhinged. Max is staring at her red silk and heavy diamonds, choking on his own jealousy. He sneers, mocking her for going from a simple secretary to playing dress-up on a new man's leash. But Audrey doesn't even blink. She looks right through him, reminding him she was only a secretary when she was holding his shattered life together. Right on cue, Silvio steps from the shadows. The boss himself slides a warm hand onto the bare curve of her lower back. A quiet, total claim. You and I both know the truth here. Sometimes, letting them watch you thrive is the most devastating revenge of all. Silvio's voice drops into the conversation like a block of ice. He looks Max dead in the eye and tells him Audrey was never small. He completely dismantles the guy, stating Max had a woman beside him who could bring an entire room to its knees, and he chose to call her manageable. Silvio makes it crystal clear that fatal error says absolutely nothing about Audrey, and everything about the painfully weak man shivering in front of them. Max just stands there, jaw unhinged, completely out of his depth. Silvio gives him one final warning to quietly enjoy the catering, then gently guides Audrey away into the crowd. It is pure poetry in motion. The lesson is simple. Never let a person define your worth just because their hands are too weak to hold your true potential. Let them go. As the music washes over them, Audrey glances at Silvio. She quietly tells him he did not have to step in back there. Silvio does not even break his stride. He simply looks down and replies, "I know." Those two words send a rush of heat straight through her chest. It is quiet confidence at its finest. The night pushes on, and the gala is a massive triumph. Silvio vanishes to handle business with shipping bosses, leaving Audrey to effortlessly secure hospital donations. But then, the wild card enters. Aldo, the toxic brother, slides up with a whiskey and a wicked grin. He chuckles, calling her brutal for breaking a man before the main course. Remember this simple truth. True influence is never about flexing a bank account. It is about making people feel something undeniably real. Audrey does not let her perfect smile slip for a second. The flashing cameras are watching every shadow. She leans in and tells Aldo she thought he enjoyed cruel things. The snake pauses. His eyes darken with intrigue, and he murmurs that he prefers honesty. And tonight, she was both. It is a rare compliment from a dangerous man. But Aldo always pushes too far. He steps into her space, his thumb casually brushing the bare skin of her waist, where the red dress dips low. It is a calculated test of power. Audrey keeps that flawless smile painted on her face, but her tone drops into a razor-sharp threat. Here is a lesson you and I can use. Hold your composure when toxic people test your boundaries. Never give your enemies the satisfaction of seeing you sweat in the spotlight. Audrey's voice is soft but lethal. She warns Aldo never to touch her again. He tries to laugh it off, but Audrey sees right through his game. She states he is only using her to test his brother. Then she drops a heavy loyalty check, making it clear that regardless of how this marriage started, she stands firmly beside Silvio. Aldo's smug smirk completely shatters. He never expected real devotion. But here is the quiet tragedy. From across the crowded Silvio only sees his brother's hand lingering near his wife. He misses the context entirely. Sometimes, doing the right thing still looks like absolute betrayal from afar. A hard life lesson to swallow is that managing perception in a dangerous world is just as critical as knowing the truth. Silvio refuses to let that moment slide. He tracks his brother down by the dimly lit staff exit, cornering him with terrifying absolute zero energy. He tells Aldo to keep his hands off his wife. Aldo just smirks, openly admitting how much he loves taking things that belong to the boss. But Silvio is not playing games tonight. His voice drops dangerously low. He orders Aldo not to look at her, not to speak to her, and to make sure his shadow never crosses her path again. Aldo, always the absolute menace, tilts his head and asks what makes this girl so special. He taunts Silvio, asking if she is just another pawn on his chessboard. The lesson here is crucial. Toxic individuals will always try to project their own twisted, dark manipulations onto your most genuine connections. Aldo is vibrating with the drama he is stirring up. He taunts Silvio, laughing that Audrey is just a condition to keep the throne out of his hands. He suggests the bride actually prefers his company. Silvio stares back with lethal stillness. His voice drops to a deadly whisper as he claims Audrey as his own, killing the disrespect. The life lesson is vital. You must set firm boundaries with toxic family instantly, or they will consume you. Aldo tries to brush it off as a joke about property, But Silvio does the unthinkable. He breaks his cold character. He quietly admits that he actually cares about her. That honest confession is far more terrifying than any physical threat he could have made. For the first time, Aldo's vicious smile vanishes. You and I are in the back of their sedan and the air is thick enough to cut. Silvio stares at the dark streets, ignoring her. Hours ago, he was perfect, defending her and showing her off. But the second the doors locked, he turned into solid ice. Audrey tries to let it go, but the memory of Aldo S.'s hand on her waist burns her up. She snaps the quiet in half, demanding answers. Silvio flatly states he has nothing useful to say. She fires back that such a thing never stopped a man before. Take note of this simple lesson. Communication is everything, and the silent treatment only breeds toxic resentment. A muscle jumps in Silvio's jaw before he drops a bitter accusation. He mutters that she certainly handled his brother well tonight. The jealousy in that car is absolutely deafening. Audrey refuses to back down. She states she ordered his twisted brother to never touch her again. Silvio hits right back, muttering that she seemed to deliver that order with a beautiful smile. The nerve. Audrey fires back, reminding him they were in a room crawling with reporters. Did he expect her to slap his brother and ruin the family reputation? Silvio finally looks at her, his eyes drowning in dark jealousy. He says he just wanted Aldo to know better. Audrey snaps, pointing out that the snake did know better, which is exactly why he pushed the boundary. Here is a crucial life lesson. Never let someone else project their blind insecurities onto your perfectly logical decisions. The rest of the drive is dead silent, and Audrey is left sitting in the shadows, absolutely fuming. The car stops at the estate. Silvio steps out, first playing the flawless husband. He offers his hand because the driver is watching. In this dark world, the illusion of unity is everything. But the second the front doors close, he drops her hand like it is made of fire. He throws out a cold goodnight and marches to his room without a glance. Audrey is left standing alone in the grand foyer. The diamonds around her neck feel like a collar of ice. He hyped her up to the city only to freeze her out in private. Here is a simple life lesson. You can only push a person into the cold for so long before they finally snap. Audrey is done playing the quiet runaway bride. She is completely sick of controlling men dictating how she breathes. The ultimate payback is finally brewing. Audrey refuses to stand there while he hides his jealousy behind a wall of silence. Her pulses hammering, she lets her anger burn hotter than her fear. She marches straight to his door. That red dress is still clinging to her, radiating the chaotic heat of the gala they just survived. She knocks hard. For an agonizing second, there is only dead silence. The simple life lesson here is that sometimes facing your fears head-on is the only way to pull the truth into the light. Then the handle clicks. Silvio stands there. His white shirt is unbuttoned at the throat, sleeves rolled up to reveal the brutal scars from his past. His face is a complete blank slate. You cannot read this mafia boss at all, and the raw tension flooding the narrow space between them is absolutely insane. That empty stare snaps her back to reality. No yelling, just Silvio watching her like a hawk. Audrey tilts her chin up, refusing to let his silence make her small. She demands to know his problem. He casually leans against the frame, totally relaxed, and innocently asks what she means. That fake ignorance almost pushes her over the edge. She steps directly into his space and orders him to drop the act. Here is the lesson. You and I must never let someone gaslight us into doubting our reality. Her voice drops low and fierce. She warns him he does not get to play the loving partner in public, kiss her neck for the cameras, and then treat her like a total stranger in the dark. This midnight confrontation is pure peak drama, and she is fiercely holding her ground. A flicker of emotion betrayed her, vanishing instantly. Audrey despised herself for caring. Silvio dropped his gaze to her lips, then back to her eyes with that freezing stare he used in the interrogation room. He asked if that was what truly bothered her. The humiliation hit so violently, she wrapped herself in fury to survive. She snapped back, saying she was sick of being treated like a wife only when it suited his agenda. The moment she dropped that word, the air turned suffocating. It is a quiet truth that angry words often reveal our deepest vulnerabilities. Silvio straightened up. His grip was unyielding as he grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his dark stare. He repeated the word wife, his voice dripping with possession. She realized her mistake far too late. That word hung between them like a ticking explosive. He released her chin, but his touch left her skin burning. Furious with her own slip, she tried to escape, telling him there was nothing left to say, but Silvio moved with the terrifying speed of a seasoned killer. His fingers locked around her wrist, yanking her inside before slamming the door shut. She spun around, eyes blazing, prepared for war. Then his voice dropped to a lethal growl as he demanded to know what was happening between her and his brother, Aldo. Suddenly, the evening made perfect sense. Aldo touching her waist, Silvio glaring from the shadows. Here is a simple lesson. Jealousy strips away our most carefully constructed masks. This was never about strict Mafia codes. The untouchable boss was simply drowning in his own jealousy. Let us step into this heavy silence together. The tension is suffocating. Audrey refuses to back down, forcing her voice to stay steady. She looks this dangerous man in the eye and swears nothing is going on with his brother. But Silvio steps closer, his cold eyes darkening. He growls that he saw Aldo touch her. Audrey fires right back, reminding him she pushed the man away because she knows her place. Then, Silvio leans in, trapping her with a devastating question. He asks if her loyalty belongs to their contract or to him. It shows us that genuine trust cannot be written on paper. It must be earned in the dark. She tries to keep her composure, but he grips her waist, yanking her red dress flush against his chest, whispering that tonight the answer matters. Audrey clutches his shirt, knuckles white, just to keep herself standing. She is done playing the victim. Her voice cracks as she tells him he has no right to play the jealous husband. He cannot abandon her, treat her like property, and punish her just because his brother tested the waters. Silvio stares at her hands, the last thread of his restraint completely snapping. He wraps an arm around her back and crushes his mouth against hers before she can take another breath. It is a desperate collision of two souls fighting for control. She gasps into the kiss, and he instantly pins her against the solid wood door. It shows that our loudest conflicts often mask the things we are terrified to ask for. Her hands slide up his bare chest, feeling his heavy heartbeat, and all that fiery resentment simply melts away into the shadows. He presses deeper, his kiss turning ruthless, shattering every rational thought. Audrey surrenders. Her fingers dig in as his hand slides down her bare back, landing precisely on the spot his brother dared to touch. This is not just passion, it is a fierce reclamation. He drags his lips down her jaw, lingering where he marked her for the cameras earlier. That was calculated, but this is pure obsession. The stoic boss has completely unraveled. She breathes his name, betraying how much she aches for him. There is a quiet lesson here: you cannot outrun your own truth forever, no matter how thick the walls you build. Silvio pulls back, his eyes burning like blue flames. His voice is a rough whisper as he reminds her she chose to come to his door. Audrey just stares back, holding him captive by his ruined collar. His grip tightens against her skin. Audrey knows she should walk away, but her pride loses the war against her instincts. She resents him for seeing through her armor, yet violently yanks him right back. Silvio lets out a stunned groan as his mouth crashes down on hers. In one massive motion, he lifts her off the floor. The room spins into a blur of shadows and sliding red silk. He drops her onto the edge of the heavy desk. He stands trapped between her knees, his chest heaving, his shirt ruined. It is a gentle reminder to own your choices, because hesitating only makes the fall more painful. Audrey gazes up at this dangerous man who spent all week suffocating his desires. The moment she reaches for him, juice again, his control shatters. The game is over. The tension in that dimly lit room is staggering. Silvio abandons the calculating game, going for that red silk dress like a man starving in the dark. Audrey fully surrenders, her fingers twisting into his hair as he trails burning kisses across her shoulder. That dress was her armor, but now it is just collateral damage. He slides his rough hand up her thigh, and for one agonizing second, the boss actually hesitates. He pauses, caught in his own rules, but Audrey is done waiting. She grabs his wrist and pulls his hand higher, shattering his final defense. He freezes before plunging them both into a wild oblivion. The empire, the fake rules, it all burns away. You and I know the truth here. Sometimes you must stop overthinking every single move. Let go of the heavy illusion of control and let yourself feel something profoundly real. Audrey believed falling for him meant losing her edge, but tonight she uncovers her truest self. Silvio scoops her off the desk, carrying her to the bed. That red silk becomes a forgotten memory on the floor. She has finished hiding behind excuses. Silvio lays her down, his jaw tight as he fights to remain gentle. Looking into his dark eyes, the ironclad marriage contract is officially dead. What remains is a raw truth between two broken people. Later, she wakes up enveloped in warmth, his calloused fingers brushing her hair. He watches her in the dim light, his gaze stripped of demands. It is a profound life lesson written in the dark. True love does not demand a performance. It simply appreciates who you are when the world is completely silent. The morning sunlight bleeds through the curtains, casting a soft glow. Yet, even in bed, Silvio radiates the aura of a dangerous predator. He is wide awake, his blue eyes locked onto her face as his hand slowly strokes her hair. With a gravelly voice, he murmurs, "Good morning, wife." Panic seizes Audrey's chest as a warm blush spreads across her cheeks. She searches for a sharp comeback to protect her pride, but he leans in, silencing her with slow, tender kisses. His hand drifts to her waist. She tries to stop him, catching his wrist, laughing and trembling all at once. His returning smile is dark and utterly lethal. Listen closely, for there is a quiet wisdom here. Never underestimate the healing power of being entirely present. Instead of rushing to build your daily walls, take a deep breath and truly witness the soul resting beside you. The dynamic shifts in a heartbeat. Silvio leans close, his voice a rough whisper as he confesses she drives him out of his mind. Audrey takes that vulnerability and flips the board. She shoves the massive boss flat onto his back and climbs over him. He spent their fake marriage dictating the terms and holding the power. But those days are dead. She leans down, brushing his lips, and delivers a reality check. She whispers that in this bed, she makes the rules. Silvio lets out a dark laugh, calling her wicked, as his hands anchor onto her waist. Surrendering to her does not feel like losing. It feels like absolute victory. Later, as they lie tangled in the sheets, the truth becomes clear. Real confidence is never about dominating the room. It is about recognizing your own profound worth and stepping boldly into a true partnership. Let us step out of the chaos. Picture the brooding silence of the Gallo house. The notorious boss is experiencing a rare breath of peace. No bullets flying. Just him and Audrey sharing the quiet dark. She breaks the silence, asking why his ruthless father cared so deeply about a marriage clause in the family will. Silvio does not flinch. His voice goes dead as he delivers a chilling truth. His father never gave a single thought to love. The old man was obsessed with the empire. He demanded heirs and pure power, treating his sons like chess pieces. It is a haunting reflection on ambition. Often, the architects who construct the grandest empires are completely emotionally bankrupt. You cannot build a dynasty on fragile feelings. Audrey studies his face and finally understands. This terrifying man is secretly buckling under decades of inherited family trauma, entirely lost on how to heal. The revelations keep spilling into the dark. Silvio confesses his father only wanted a puppet secured by a family, not a true king. Audrey then mentions Aldo, the brother acting like the universe owes him blood. Aldo uses Silvio as a punching bag for his own rage. Silvio agrees with a bitter smile. Unable to strike their father, Aldo aimed at the nearest target. Then the boss drops the most devastating truth. In a whisper, he reveals his mother died the day he was born. No one explicitly blamed him, but nobody told him he was innocent. It is a crushing reality. Unspoken blame rots a soul faster than any bullet. Audrey no longer sees an invincible Mafia king. She just sees a grieving boy carrying the heavy weight of a ghost. Picture this dynamic. They handed a boy a criminal empire before he was ever allowed to be a child. Audrey pieces together the broken puzzle of their vendetta. Aldo believed Silvio robbed his throne, while Silvio was convinced Aldo stole his mother's life. Silvio offers a painful smirk, whispering that she makes trauma sound neatly organized. Audrey does not back down. She tells him wounds are organized, but people just bleed from unexpected places. There is a quiet truth here. Hurt people will always lash out in ways that make zero sense until you uncover the root of their pain. Silvio stares at her, completely disarmed. She walked into the darkest room of his mind without a single flinch. For a man who breathes manipulation, this raw honesty is a total shock to his tired soul. Sit with me for a second, because this arrangement just shifted into something heavy. Silvio drops a confession in the quiet of the night. He looks at Audrey, his guard stripped away, and tells her he wants to marry her again. But for real this time. No hidden contracts, no side deals, and no ghosts of exfiances. He gently presses his lips to her trembling hand, vowing that he wants the world to know she is his actual choice. Audrey is lying there, completely paralyzed by this massive shift. Finally, she breathes out the question that haunts her. Last week, she was just a convenient escape plan. Why her and why now? You and I both know the answer. Sometimes, the most beautiful things in this messy life only happen the very second we finally stop pretending. Audrey is barely breathing, waiting for the painful catch she assumes is coming. But Silvio leans in, shadows hiding his face, and hits her with the raw truth. His voice is a low rumble. He tells her she walked into his brutal world completely terrified, yet still looked at him like he was the one who needed saving. She challenged him and used to absolute obedience. He confesses she saw straight through his cold armor, recognized his bleeding trauma, and never once called him weak. His future is no longer about guarding a frozen empire. It is about her standing by his side. That is a quiet truth to carry with you. True love is never about finding a flawless soul. It is about finding someone who traces the edges of your darkest scars and decides to stay anyway. 3 months drift by, and the heavy gloom of this mansion begins to lift. That cold contract is nothing but ash now. The morning routine shifts. Breakfast is pushed back 10 minutes, then 20. The staff picks up on the change. Maids learn to knock twice. Hardened guards stare at the ceiling when Audrey slips out of Silvio's office, her lipstick visibly smudged. It is beautifully human. Then there is Aldo, sitting at the long table with his bitter sarcasm. He watches his brother act fiercely protective over Audrey and roasts them without mercy. He tells the silent room that everyone is just pretending not to know why they are waking up late. Let that be a gentle reminder. You can never truly hide genuine happiness from the world, no matter how hard you try to play it cool. Michael pours coffee like a ghost who survives by never reacting to the boss. Across the table, Audrey hides a blush behind her mug. But beneath the heavy wood, where nobody can see, Silvio is holding her hand with devastating gentleness, anchoring her to this new reality. Out in the world, Audrey is stepping into her own fire. At the Harbour Group, our staff has stopped traveling and started looking to her as a true leader. Department heads rush to her office to diffuse disasters before they ignite. She briefly masters the chaos of wealthy donors and toxic wives. Sometimes in life, you are handed a role that terrifies you. But if you just step into those massive shoes and own your space, that nervous confidence eventually becomes your actual reality. Audrey is learning a cold truth. Real power is never about screaming loud. It is found in quiet moves, rewriting broken rules, and turning a forced obligation into a burning passion. She breathes new life into the Harbour Foundation. Instead of mingling with the elite, she sits down with exhausted nurses, social workers, and mothers forgotten by the system. She builds an empire of pure empathy. And Silvio, he sits at high society dinners, a dangerous man reduced to a proud husband, openly boasting that his wife built it all. One night, she marches into his dim office with a massive proposal, eyes burning with fierce vision. Remember this quiet lesson. True influence comes from genuinely listening to the broken, not just shouting cold orders from the top. Let us unpack this next moment together, because it is a quiet heartbreaker. Audrey gently slides a proposal across his desk. It is titled the Lucia Gallo Women's Care Fund. She used his murdered mother's name to fund emergency birth services. When Silvio reads the title, his body goes rigid. The silence is suffocating. You can feel the agonizing weight of his childhood trauma crashing down. Audrey circles the desk, her voice steady. She tells him his mother's name should bring life, and she refuses to let it only be a tragedy. Silvio grips the paper, hands trembling, and whispers she should have warned him. But here is the raw truth. The most profound healing always comes from confronting the exact memories we spend our whole lives trying to outrun. Audrey looks at the most feared man in the city with blunt truth. If she had warned him, his fear would have made him burn the paper. She presses a gentle kiss to his tense forehead, asking him to let his mother's memory bring new life into this dark world. Just like that, this ruthless boss shatters. He pulls a hand to his mouth, kissing her palm, and surrenders with a quiet whisper. A week later, the storm has passed. Audrey stands on the terrace, listening to the crashing waves. She is picking flowers for a wedding that began as a survival tactic but bloomed into something deeply real. Never forget this. The hardest souls always hide a tender center, and true strength is knowing exactly when to drop your heavy armor and let someone inside. The peace does not last. Aldo steps onto the terrace, and for the first time his hands are empty. No whiskey glass, no smirk, just a dangerous stillness. He looks at Audrey, the air thick with regret, and asks an agonizing question. Was there a timeline where she would have chosen him over his brother? The tension is heavy. Audrey does not offer a polite lie. She meets his gaze with a brutal truth. She says maybe she would have if he had ever actually wanted her more than he wanted to destroy Silvio. Aldo slowly nods, taking the devastating hit. He whispers that her honesty is a terribly clean knife. Let this echo in your mind tonight. Never let yourself become a pawn in a bitter revenge plot. Real love is built on a foundation of hope, not the wreckage of someone else. Audrey stands by the water, refusing to soften the blow. She admits Aldo saw her true colors first. He noticed her quiet terror while everyone else was blind. But then she draws a painful line. Silvio actually allowed her to change his dark soul, and she let him rewrite hers in return. Aldo scoffs, muttering that a love like that sounds exhausting. Audrey stares into the wind and says it is worth the cost. There is a heavy lesson here. True devotion is not just watching someone from the shadows. It requires the raw courage to evolve alongside them. Hearing this, Aldo finally fractures. He confesses that he spent his entire existence coming in second place. Audrey feels the tragic sting, but refuses to offer cheap pity, knowing he would only hide behind another cynical joke. Audrey holds his gaze and delivers the hard truth. She tells him to stop treating every room he enters like a race for affection. Aldo's jaw clenches hard. For a fleeting second, he looks like a tired man who kept sprinting miles past the finish line, his mask slipping back into place. He warns her that if she keeps speaking like that, the world might mistake her for someone merciful. Audrey offers a dark smirk. She tells him nobody who actually knows her would ever make that mistake. Aldo gives her an unreadable stare, offers one stiff nod, and retreats toward the mansion. As she watches him fade, a quiet truth settles in. Sometimes, drawing an unbreakable boundary is the absolute only way to force a toxic person to finally carry their own heavy baggage instead of dropping it on you. Audrey turns to the dark water, letting the cold wind whip her hair. She tells Aldo, with no anger left, that he always saw right through her. He knew when she was terrified or playing a part, but then she drops the heavy anchor. Silvio surrendered to her. He let her change his violent world, and she let him change her right back. Aldo lets out a rattling sigh, muttering that it sounds exhausting. Audrey replies that it is worth every agonizing second. He stares at the black waves and whispers his deepest insecurity. He has spent his whole life arriving in second place. Her chest tightens with grief, but she holds her ground. She knows pity would only feed his bitter sarcasm. Listen closely. Sometimes, leaving someone to sit in the freezing reality of their own choices is the most honest way to deal with them. You and I are going to unpack this together, tracing back to exactly 6 days before the vows. The estate was breathing pure panic. Dress fittings, frantic phone calls, a guest list so tangled it made even the Iceman Michael crack. But Audrey, she woke up to a totally different kind of noise, a quiet, heavy shift deep inside her bones. She sat frozen on the edge of that massive bed, the morning light cutting through the shadows, listening to a truth she had not even confirmed yet. She reached for the little box she hid 2 days ago. Right there, surrounded by absolute chaos, she took the test. Here is the quiet truth about life. The heaviest, most beautiful changes never wait for the perfect hour. They crash right into your messy reality, demanding you step up and face them. Picture her standing there in the cold bathroom light, silk robe slipping off her shoulder, staring at those 2 little lines. The boss's child is growing inside her. She presses a trembling hand to her stomach, caught in a brutal tug of war between blinding terror and a love so fierce it physically aches. 2 floors down, Silvio is tracing over blueprints for a clinic named after his dead mother. Audrey marches past the guards and pushes open his heavy oak doors. Michael is standing there, but one look at Audrey's pale face, and Silvio waves him out. The heavy door clicks shut. She doesn't say a word. She just steps up and places that piece of plastic right on his dark mahogany desk. Sometimes, when life hands you a mountain, you do not try to explain it. You just set it down in the open, and you climb it together. The most feared man in the city just stares at the desk, completely blank. And then the realization hits him like a physical blow. All the color rushes out of his face. He is paralyzed, trapped in the ghosts of his own bloody childhood. In his dark world, new life is just another target, another thing waiting to be violently ripped away. Audrey steps closer. She grabs his cold, trembling hands. She tells him this is not the curse he inherited. This time, the story breaks the cycle. Silvio chokes out a rough, desperate promise to protect her, but Audrey just shakes her head. She tells him that protection is easy, but he needs to love them. He confesses that love is the one thing he does not know to do. Real courage is not the absence of terror. It is feeling your knees shake and taking the step anyway. Right there in the quiet office, the untouchable king of the underworld drops to his knees. He buries his face in her hands, taking his first real breath in years. For the first time, he looks at tomorrow and does not see a grave. Audrey just holds him, an anchor in the storm. Skip ahead to the morning of the wedding. Audrey stands before a tall glass mirror, waiting for the familiar cold dread. But the fear is gone. The last time she wore white, she was calculating how many miles she could run. Today, her feet are firmly planted. She finds Michael and asks for Aldo. He tells her that the lone wolf is down by the water. She gathers up her heavy gown and steps out into the wind. True power is not about controlling the room. It is standing still in the ashes of your old life and finally choosing to stay. Audrey catches Michael's worried glance and swears she is not pulling a disappearing act. She walks down to the rocky shore. The wind is vicious, ripping off the dark water. Aldo is just standing there, staring at the grey waves, drowning in his own isolation. He does not say a word, just peels off his tailored jacket and drops it over her bare shoulders so the cold does not bite. She looks right at him and asks if he actually cares. Aldo scoffs, telling her not to ruin his bad reputation on her wedding day. He throws out a bitter joke about her track record of running away in white dresses. Audrey shuts it down. She tells him she came out here to make sure he does not fade into the shadows. Real loyalty means walking into the cold to pull someone back, especially when they are trying their hardest to push you away. Stick with me, because this is where the ice breaks. Audrey steps into his space. She demands to know if he is walking into that chapel as family or as a threat. Aldo puts up his guard, asking what happens if he chooses to be the enemy. Audrey looks at him with zero hesitation. She says Silvio would lose a piece of his soul. That hits Aldo deep. His mask slips. He asks if the boss actually cares that much. Audrey tells him the bond runs deeper than the blood spilled between them. Aldo offers a sad, cracked smile, joking about their awful taste in family. He asks her to pass along his RSP, but she refuses. She tells him to walk through those doors himself. You and I know the truth. Treat a broken man like a monster, and he will play the part. Treat him like a brother, and he might just come home. Audrey leaves the rocky shore and heads back to the estate. Waiting by the heavy iron doors is Silvio. The man who holds the city in his hands is standing rigid, knuckles white, quietly fighting off his darkest shadows. He notices the damp sand clinging to her dress. A tight smiles, Ishlin Ispompos, joking about her habit of vanishing right before the vows. Audrey simply reaches out and wraps her warm fingers around his clenched fist. She tells him she was not running. She was out there, making sure his broken family was whole before she met him at the altar. Silvio just closes his eyes, completely speechless, and presses his lips to her knuckles. Here is a quiet truth for you to remember. Real strength is not measured by the vast empires you conquer, but by the broken pieces you manage to hold together. Inside the chachapur, the heavy air feels different. Hardened men with violent pasts sit quietly, throats tight. Right there in the front row sits Aldo, completely present. The wooden doors swing open. Years ago, the first time she wore white, Audrey was a terrified girl running into enemy territory. Today, Sylvia is not hunting her. The most dangerous man alive is simply standing still, waiting. For a man built on absolute control, it is a beautiful surrender. As she takes his hands at the altar, he whispers that their first vows were just a contract, but today is a choice. Audrey smiles, telling him she is finally choosing her own fate. Life offers us a quiet mercy. You always have the power to pick up the pen and rewrite your own ending, no matter how chaotic your earlier chapters used to be. The priest speaks the final words, and Silvio kisses her like they are the only two breathing souls left on earth. Later, the reception feels like a shadowy underworld summit. The room is filled with dangerous men holding expensive cigars. Michael brings out a heavy ledger, officially marking the family empire as untouchable. One by one, the city's ghosts step forward to bow to the Don, but then the music seems to fade. Aldo steps out from the crowd. The entire room holds its breath. He has no glass in his hand, no bitter smirk to hide behind. He walks right up to his brother. He catches Audrey's eye for a split second, a silent thank you for pulling him from the edge. Let's look at this together, because the truth is striking. You can buy obedience with violence, but genuine respect is only ever earned through grace. Aldo looks his older brother dead in the eye. His voice drops low as he admits he spent his life confusing their shared trauma with a birthright. He finally calls Silvio the boss, but firmly refuses to live as a ghost anymore. The ruthless Don steps down from the head table. He grips Aldo's shoulder and tells him to take his place by his side. Aldo touches the family crest, burying decades of poison. Later that night, Michael slips a file onto the desk. An old rival had tried to ruin the wedding, but Aldo had quietly handled it in the shadows. When Silvio asks about it, Aldo just smirks and says the guy talked too much. The lesson here is quiet but heavy. True security is not about dodging every bullet yourself. It is having someone loyal in the dark, catching them for you. Audrey watches them, realizing Aldo chose his family long before swearing the oath. Then his dark eyes drop down. He notices the heavy, protective way Silvio's rests as against Audrey's stomach. The infamous hitman literally stops breathing as the truth clicks in his head. A slow grin spreads across his face as he mocks Silvio's defensive posture. Silvio's shoulders go rigid, ready for a fight. But Audrey steps in with a soft smile, gently telling Uncle Aldo to watch his language. The words hit the hardened killer like a freight train. That simple title completely strips away his violent armor. He mutters a joke about the poor kid being doomed, but his eyes are shining. Sometimes, the only way to disarm a deeply damaged soul is simply to offer them a permanent seat at your table. Silvio growls a warning. He tells his brother that if the child starts repeating his trash, there will be a price. Aldo just smirks, his chest rising with a quiet, unfamiliar pride. Months fade away into a bright afternoon. The The hospital wing opens, bearing the name of the mother they lost to the streets. In a quiet act of mercy, Silvio pulled the right threads so stubborn Arthur Palmer could keep his humble diner. Outside the doors, Audrey feels a sharp flutter beneath her ribs. Silvio places his massive hand over hers, utterly wrecked by a peace he never thought he deserved. A few feet away, Aldo leans against a black sedan, failing miserably at looking tough. You and I have reached the end of this road. The ultimate victory is not surviving the long war. It is building a quiet, deeply rooted place where love can finally grow. Fast forward through the storm, and we find Silvio staring at a beautiful, hand-painted sign. He turns to Audrey, his voice thick with emotion, telling her she finally brought his mother's buried legacy back into the light. She looks up, asking softly if the terrifying boss is still afraid of the dark. Silvio drops his armor, admitting he lives in fear daily, but is finally learning to stop using control as a weapon. Aldo breaks the mood, laughing that if their unborn baby inherits Silvio's charm, they are all doomed. Aldo playfully calls the baby Dante, but Audrey fiercely replies that her son's name is Leon. Silvio jokes that a Don should be consulted. You and I have probably both learned this the hard way. True emotional healing means dropping your heavy armor and trusting the ones you love. Silvio rests a heavy hand against Audrey's stomach, his voice warm as he jokes about naming his future son. Aldo clutches his chest, pretending to be heartbroken the boy will not be named Dante. Audrey actually laughs. That bright sound cuts right through all the blood and betrayal we have seen. Think about the terrifying path she walked. She stumbled into this empire barefoot in a torn wedding dress. Now, she wears the Don's ring, carries his heir, and rules the shadows without a single thought of running away. She stopped fearing the dark and learned to command it. We all have that hidden resilience waiting to be tested.
Thank you for walking through this story with me tonight.
Stay safe. And remember, sometimes the very storm that was meant to destroy you ends up being exactly what sets you free. Max Gordon represents a common but dangerous kind of emotional control. He does not simply want Audrey as a wife. He wants her as proof of his image, reputation, and social success. When she runs away, he is not heartbroken in a loving way. He's embarrassed, angry, and worried, and about what is what other thing. It's revealed that he sees the wedding as an event to manage, not a sacred commitment between two people. This teaches a major educational lesson. Control should never be confused with love. A partner who truly loves you does not call you manageable, predictable, or useful. A loving person does not humiliate you into obedience or treat your escape as a public relations problem. Max wants Audrey back because losing her damages his ego, not because he respects her heart. This is why Audrey's confrontation with him becomes so meaningful. She realizes that he never truly saw her as an equal. He saw her as someone he could shape into what he needed. Many people experience relationships like this in real life. They are slowly trained to become quieter, more agreeable, less demanding, and less themselves. At first, this may be presented as compromise, but over time it becomes erasure. Audrey's story teaches viewers to recognize the difference between healthy partnership and emotional ownership. Love should help a person grow, not shrink. Love should make room for voice, anger, dreams, mistake, and independence. If someone only values you when you obey, that is not love. That is control wearing a romantic mask. Audrey's decision to stop being manageable is a lesson in self-respect. She shows that being difficult to control is not a flaw. Sometimes it is the clearest sign that a person is finally becoming free.